What if Edward became human and Bella faced the truth? Part 2. Carlisle arrived home to find the two newborns there had already awakened in their humanoid bodies. "How are you awake already?" he demanded, staring at them in shock. "It's supposed to take 6 days." He wondered if there was something different about them. He quickly carried the girls inside, dropping them down onto Jasper's and Alice's bed. He figured Jasper didn't sleep and Alice was staying on the reservation, so they had no need of it, unlike everyone else in the family. If these two follow the same pattern, they'll be awake in the next 510 minutes, he realized, which means Victoria is probably awake too. "Where's Jasper? I wish he was here. I don't know what to do. Nothing makes sense anymore." Jasper raced through the forest, hearing his mate's stuttering heartbeat. His eyes scanned the trees as he ran, following the pole. He spotted her about 15 feet up, draped over a tree branch, hanging limply. The bastard had done it, was long gone. The smell of wolves following his trail. "Track him," Jasper ordered. "Make sure Hess dead." Peter and Char ran off without a word, eager to destroy the asshole who dared injure their brother's mate. They followed the trail to the river and dived in, swimming along with the current, eagle eyes watching the bottom for evidence of the vampire's exit. They could tell had been through there recently, since the sediment had been disturbed by his passage. Meanwhile, Jasper jumped up to the branch where his beloved rested and very carefully lifted her into his arms, jumping back to the ground with her. He laid her down gently and began searching her for injuries, quickly determining she had a broken neck. Before he had a chance to complete his examination, he heard a menacing growl. A newborn with hungry black eyes sprinted toward him. "Shush mine," Raoul protested. "Back away." "Shush my mate," Jasper roared, "and you nearly killed her." In a matter of seconds Raoul was in pieces. Unfortunately, Jasper had used his lighter up on the previous batch of newborns had dispatched. He sent an emotional cocktail to Peter and Char, letting them know to drop whatever they were doing and return to his side post-haste. Peter and Char had located the spot where the newborn had held himself underwater for several minutes, then jumped out of the river and directly into a nearby tree. They'd started tracking him through the trees, realizing he was heading back toward the place where they'd found Bella. When they got the message from their sire, they dropped to the ground and hurried back to him, finding him inspecting his mate well surrounded by wriggling vampire pieces. Jasper knew Bella's house was much closer than the Cullens' house, so he decided to run his mate there to turn her. Charlie already knew about his kind, so it wouldn't matter if he saw Jasper, would arrange for transport to a safer location. Once he had Bella stabilized, he wanted to get her inside a building, though not only for her comfort, but because he was unsure of the current situation with Victoria and the rest of her newborns. He could risk being ambushed by an army while he'd be incapacitated by his mate's pain from the venom running through her veins, changing her. With a nod of his head, he gestured for Peter and Char to gather up the puzzle pieces to bring back to Charlie's house, where he'd be able to roast them properly. Lee and Seth had been backtracking along the river's edge when they heard vampires jump out of the river and start jumping through the trees, with Carlisle's warning of Raoul's likely method of travel firmly in their minds. Having been delivered through Quill, they gave pursuit, thus they arrived just in time to see Jasper carefully pick up a limp broken Bella in his arms, while Peter and Char started gathering body parts. They better not be planning to put him back together, Lee thought, crossly relieved to see yellow eyes on the new vampires rather than the freaky crimson of the ones what attacked the reservation earlier. "Howdy, did y'all come for the bonfire?" Peter asked cheerfully, seeming unfazed by the menacing beasts, though he subtly moved to get between them and his mate. Both wolves nodded emphatically, able to hear how weak Bella's heartbeat was and see how pale and lifeless she seemed. "Awesome. You don't happen to have a lighter on you, do ya?" he asked hopefully. Lee and Seth looked at each other, then shook their heads disappointedly. Usually they carried a lighter in the pocket of their spare clothes, but with the emergency attack this afternoon, neither had taken the extra time to tie a set of clothes to their ankles before phasing. "Right, well, we're gonna have to find one then." The major indicated we should follow him, and he usually knows what Hess doing, so if you want to grab a few parts and help carry, we can do this all in one trip, I think, Peter suggested. The wolves shrugged and eagerly helped Lee grab the torso, lifting it in the air. With her teeth attached to the guy's belt, Seth carried one of the legs, though he dropped it the first time, having bit through the denim of the vampire's jeans and punctured its flesh. The bitter taste of venom on his tongue caused him to rapidly spit it out. He picked it up gingerly the second time, not wanting a repeat of the repugnant flavor. Jasper raced ahead, bringing Bella into her room and lying her gently on her bed. Had caught some disturbing scents on the way back to Charlie's house and took a minute to run back outside and investigate. Victoria had been there along with 4 newborns. Carlisle and Edward had also been there, and Carlisle had started to chase after the newborn who had Bella, but had stopped just a few miles before he got to her and turned around to run back to the house instead. Why had he left Bella hanging in a tree with a broken neck? Jasper wondered if Carlisle's trail had suddenly headed toward the Cullen house. Instead, had have understood if something had happened to Esme, she would always be Carlisle's first priority. After all, she was Carlisle's life, just as Bella was now his. The only thing he could think of was that Carlisle must have heard Edward being attacked and had broken off his pursuit of Bella to save Edward instead. That might have been understandable knowing the wolves were on Bella's trail and would be able to get to her faster than Carlisle himself, yet that theory didn't match the scents Head found in the front yard. Carlisle had returned and put the two newborns into Edward's car, then driven away with Edward. Wad walked to the car under his own power. There was no scent of spilled venom, the newborns appeared to be intact when Carlisle had put them in the car. Why would he help the enemy over his own family? Perhaps one of the newborns had a gift, something that clouded Carlisle's judgment, Jasper theorized, something that caused him to protect her life over his own children, a dangerous and powerful gift to be sure, something like Chelsea's gift perhaps. He hoped for Carlisle's sake that he had a good reason for abandoning a fragile Bella in favor of the nearly immortal Edward once again, because as it stood, Jasper was ready to rip Carlisle to shreds and bury the pieces on different continents for a few decades. The others arrived to the house and made a pile of parts in the backyard. Jasper looked at the wolves and growled, "Bella has a broken neck, she's dying. I don't give a damn about the treaty I'm changing her, and if you try to stop me or interfere in any way I'll kill you in a heartbeat." He looked fierce, incredibly intimidating, his black eyes glowing with an inner fire, and the wolves could see a glimpse of the Diablo so highly feared around the world. They knew he was deadly serious and knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was fully capable of following through. They'd shared in Jacob's experience with Jasper's gift through Jake's memories, which had proven they'd be helpless against the onslaught of emotion no matter how hard they tried to fight it. Both wolves promptly sat on their haunches, indicating their acceptance. Besides, she can always be turned back into a human or humanoid or whatever Alice is now, Lee reassured herself. She liked the former vampire, admired her enthusiasm for life. She knew it was shallow, selfish and self-centered of her, but she'd only agreed to give the little pixie a chance after learning Alice was giving the wolves $5 million each as payment for all they had to give up to protect the tribe. Then once she'd taken the time to get to know Jake's girl, she'd actually come to like her and enjoy spending time with her. Lee had intended to hate Alice on principle, not just for once being a leech, but primarily because Alice had essentially done to Jasper what Sam had done to her, broken up a long-term relationship in favor of an imprint. Jasper ran into the house without another word, with everyone else staring after him. They heard him whisper apologies to Bella, then begin biting her in multiple places, sealing in his venom. Peter rubbed the back of his head in confusion. "Well, all right, Lee, then don't really know what bug crawled up his ass or what the hell has been going on here, but I reckon one of us needs to locate a lighter." He went over to the grill and searched in the cabinet beneath it, but Bella had already taken the one from their Seth-phased human, intending to go into the house and look there. Peter and Char stared at the naked boy in shock for a second before Peter flashed over and covered Char's eyes with his hand. "Damn boy, my wife don't need to be seeing that. What if she suddenly decides she prefers bestiality over necrophilia? Then where would I be?" Seth cracked up, trying to cover himself with his hands, and even Lee gave a wolfish grin. Char rolled her eyes beneath his hands, knowing he was trying to lighten the mood like he usually did. "You think that's bad, but that's my big sister," Seth replied, indicating Lee with his head. "Believe me, she wants to see this even less than you do, but we didn't have time to grab a change of clothes before killing the vampires who were attacking our tribe this morning." "Ah, I see. Too bad you can't keep a few strategically placed tufts of fur when you change back, sister. Well, if you want to change back, darling, I'll force myself to endure staring at your no doubt gorgeous, incredibly fit naked figure. It's a tough job, but I'm willing to take one for the team," Peter teased, waggling his eyebrows. Char elbowed him hard in the ribs, causing him to cry out and bend over in pain. Char winked at Lee, who couldn't help feeling amused by Peter's words and antics, though she'd have been bristling if it were anybody else. Lee couldn't figure out what it was about this vampire that calmed her natural instincts. For some reason she didn't want to kill him, didn't have the urge to decapitate him. Instead, she felt an odd sense of camaraderie, as if he was an annoying but amusing older brother. She didn't want to hurt him, and consequently she didn't want to hurt his mate either, knowing that would hurt him as well. "Sorry, sugar, but our spare clothes are still in the trunk of Jasper's car back in Seattle, or I'd gladly loan you something. You can have my coat if you want," Char offered. Seth winced. "Sorry, Mom, but I'm afraid the scent would be a little too strong for us. I don't think we could keep human form with vampire scent so close to us, our instincts would go into overdrive." Get something of Bella's and Charlie's for them," Jasper called down, his voice pained. Peter and Char quickly complied, finding the largest, loosest garments they could. Char took them outside, holding onto them with oven mitts she'd found in the kitchen to keep her scent from saturating the clothes. The wolves were highly appreciative of her thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, Peter searched through the kitchen drawers until he found a matchbook. He also made a side trip into the pantry and the fridge. He strolled outside and tossed a package of hot dogs to Seth's ears. "Nothing that says bonfire better than toasting marshmallows, but I couldn't find any, so I figured hot dogs would have to do," Peter declared. "I've got the matches if you want to grab a stick. This puppy is gonna burn hot and fast, so you gotta be ready before I started." Lee shook her head and rolled her eyes, but Seth decided to play along. He grabbed the large fork from under the grill and speared a hot dog onto it. "Okay ready," he announced cheerfully. Peter grinned and dropped a lit match onto the pile of Raoul's parts. Peter wrapped his arm around Char as they watched the flames dance off. "There's nothing like sitting by the vampire to warm you up on a chilly spring day," he murmured appreciatively. Char giggled and snuggled closer. Lee rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide her smirk, and Seth dramatically roasted his hot dog in the briefly roaring fire with a sense of satisfaction. The others watched as Seth took a bite, then spit it out on the ground. "Ugh, too sweet," he complained. Everyone laughed. "So your tribe was attacked earlier today. Clearly something went down here, and we were attacked as well." This Victoria character managed a multifaceted approach, rather sophisticated divide and conquer. "How effective was it?" Peter asked. "Is anybody hurt?" "2 innocent humans were killed on the reservation," Lee declared, "but they were the only casualties other than Bella. We burned the 3 vampires who came on our land and helped with the one here. Apparently the Cullens burned one of the ones who attacked their house too, but they've let the other ones live." "What?" Jasper roared from upstairs. "Why are they stupid?" "Yes," Lee agreed. "Fucking insane. Carlisle wanted us to let this one here go too, but according to Alice, he was planning to rape Bella before killing her, so I had no intention of going easy on him." Jasper roared wordlessly, rattling the windows. "I get that Carlisle's a pacifist, but that's taking things too far," Char mumbled angrily. "Speaking of Alice, I thought she was Jasper's mate," Peter added, confused. "Where the hell is she?" "She left him, broke up with him after Jacob, one of our pack members imprinted on her," Lee explained bitterly. "That's impossible," Peter denied. "Vampire mating is forever. They were bonded, it's unbreakable, and how could a shifter possibly imprint on a vampire? The smell alone would drive them both crazy." "She wasn't a vampire anymore, she got cursed by a witch to become human again," Seth clarified. "Somehow when she became human their bond weakened because it wasn't supernatural anymore, though I don't really understand that because Jasper is still a vampire anyway. They grew apart and when she met Jacob, he imprinted on her and she accepted it, cutting ties with Jasper completely. She was the source of the bond, having seen me in her visions and fallen for me decades before I ever met her. Jasper called down, so when she willingly went to the witch and asked to be changed, it destroyed our bond." "Damn, Jay, looks like you should have invested in a pumpkin shell," Peter chided, hugging Char closer. "Worked well for me." "Shut up, asshole," Jasper grumbled. Char noticed Lee and Seth staring at Peter uncomprehendingly. "Emmett likes to call Peter Pumpkin Eater as a silly nickname. It's from the nursery rhyme," she explained, not seeing any light of recognition in their eyes. She continued, "That's the first line of the rhyme, the rest is had a wife, but couldn't keep her, put her in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well." "That doesn't make any sense," Seth replied. "Yeah, the joke loses its funny when you have to explain it," Peter grumbled, pouting. "So the Pixie-pyre is human now, but somehow embedding Shess not the only one." "All the Cullens except Carlisle stepped into the noose," Jasper declared darkly, "and I was barely able to stop him." The witch admitted it was a curse, that her intentions were evil, yet they all lined up for her magic without considering the consequences, like sheep to the slaughter. "Wow, so we've got 5 former vampires with knowledge of our kind running around," Peter whistled. "That's not going to go over well with the Volturi." "There's more now," Lee admitted with disgust. "The ones the Cullens didn't burn are all changing too. According to Dr. Fang, the blood of the former leeches is cursed and contagious. It not only changes the suckers who drink it, but the scent enslaves them the moment they smell it, so they don't even care about their own self-preservation anymore. You can set them on fire or attempt to decapitate them while they're drinking and they won't even flinch." "I knew it, that fucking witch has introduced a plague," Jasper yelled. He used the phone by Bella's bed to call Carlisle. "Hello?" Carlisle asked, not sure who was on the other line. "Bella. Bella nearly died, no thanks to you," Jasper snarled. "You left her hanging from a tree limb with a broken neck. What the hell were you thinking?" "Oh, the wolves were on her trail, so I thought they would keep her safe. There were screaming, convulsing people lying on the police chief's front lawn. I could let the humans find them. If they'd taken them to the hospital we would been exposed," Carlisle defended. "Why the hell didn't you just burn them?" Edward could taken care of it while you took care of Bella." "No, they're still so young they could go home to their families," Carlisle protested. "Families? You think Victoria chose innocent schoolchildren and productive law-abiding citizens for her army?" Jasper huffed. "They're prostitutes, druggies and criminals. Carlisle, you won't be doing anybody any favors by releasing them back into society. Even if that were an option, at best they're humans who know the secret and can't be turned, which means an automatic death penalty at worst. They're carriers of a plague designed to exterminate our kind. It's too dangerous to let them live. They need to be eliminated." "I'm sure we could convince them not to tell anyone what they've seen," Carlisle began. "Are you kidding me?" Jasper interrupted. "You already said you could let the humans find them because medical tests on them would quickly expose them as non-human. What do you think is the first thing that would happen when they show up after being missing for months? It's too risky. Even if they weren't vampire magnets, if you let them go to live their lives they'd draw on other vampires passing on the First word would get back to the Volturi, who would trace it back to Edward and the others, and they'd execute your entire family. Your only hope of protecting your mate and your children is to keep this mess contained. Once the Volturi learn of their folly, they'll all be destroyed." Carlyle sighed, but couldn't come up with anything else to say in his defense. "Kill them all now, Carlyle," Jasper ordered him, coming over there with Bella, Peter, Char and 2 wolves, "and the enemy better all be dead by the time we get there. I want to see and smell the ashes." "I thought you said Bella's neck is broken. You shouldn't move her, it can cause worse damage." "It'll come over there," Carlyle hastily interjected, worried. "She's got enough venom in her system now to stabilize her for the move," Jasper calmly replied. You bitter," Carlyle shrieked, interrupting. "You broke the treaty. The wolves will come after us now." "Bo's afraid of the big bad wolves, not me," Jasper growled. "If they're feeling ready to die, they're welcome to attempt retaliation, but there was no way in hell I was going to allow my mate to die personally. I believe they're a lot smarter than that and will accept the situation as unavoidable, since you didn't do your job in protecting her, choosing to experiment with the newbies instead." "Your mate?" Carlyle asked, confused. Do you mean Bella?" "Yes, Carlyle, I mean Bella," Jasper retorted. "You left my mate in the hands of a murdering rapist so you could go play scientist, abandoning the girl you call daughter to die in the woods, just like your stupid son. I thought you learned from your previous mistakes not to choose Eddie over Bella, but obviously I was wrong. You're even worse at being a father than at being a coven leader, believe me. I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." "Oh shit," Carlyle muttered under his breath. "Jasper, Save your breath, old man," Jasper snapped, not interested in hearing apologies or excuses. "You'd better have ashes for me by the time I get there, or it's going to be worse for you, I assure you." Jasper hung up the phone, carefully restraining himself from crushing it the way he wanted to do. Is it really such a bad thing to let them live?" Seth hesitantly questioned. Peter looked at him seriously. "One of the King's Era Volturi has the ability to read every thought you've ever had in your entire existence with a touch of his hand. Another of the King's chaos has been working for centuries toward the extinction of werewolves all around the globe. You may not be children of the moon like Hess used to seeing, but since you're able to kill vampires, I doubt he'll care about the distinction between your two species. If they come for the Cullens, they'll find out about your existence, and then they'll deliberately wipe out your entire tribe to remove the threat you represent. With the way this curse works, making their blood irresistible to other vampires who then become cursed as well after drinking it, won't take long for word to reach the Volturi, and then heads will roll. So you have to make a choice between the lives of the former vampires who were created to kill you and the lives of your entire tribe. I'm sorry you have to see this stuff at such a young age, but this is war, and sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." Seth flinched but nodded understandingly. Lee's mind was spinning at the revelation of Jasper and Bella being mates. Shed felt the love Carlyle had for Esme through Jacob's memories that had done as much to change the perspective the pack had on vampires as Alice herself had, along with the pain they'd felt from Bella, knowing how much it had hurt her to be separated from her mate when Edward left, as much as it would hurt one of them to be separated from their imprints. Now that the shifters knew the depths of love vampires were capable of feeling and the strength of their mating bonds, all while getting to know and love a former vampire who had become one of their own, they couldn't help but recognize the vampires as individuals. They were people now, each of whom had the ability to make a moral choice between right and wrong. To further confuse the issue, Lee found herself liking Peter for reasons she couldn't explain. She even liked him better than most of her pack brothers. She was comfortable in his presence, even sitting close to him in her human form, allowing herself to be vulnerable. As much as it shocked her, she trusted him. She trusted him not to lose control, not to attack her without provocation, and not to hurt her. Which was more than she could say for anyone else in her life, other than Seth. She furrowed her brow, realizing she was enjoying his company, even though he was clearly a very dangerous war-hardened vampire. Everything in her life had been turned on its head in the past few days, calling everything she ever thought she knew into question. Shed felt sorry for both Jasper and Bella for losing the people they loved, just as she had. Now she was finding out that the two of them had been given a second chance by the universe. They'd found their forever love with each other. It was fitting, most of all, though it gave her hope. Perhaps there was someone out there for her too, a soulmate of her own, someone who would love, cherish and adore her the way she wanted, needed. If Jasper and Bella could start over again and come out on top, then maybe she could too. Jasper came out of the house cradling Bella in his arms. The group could hear how strong her heartbeat was now as it pushed the venom through her system. He climbed into the bed of her truck, settling her in his lap. He threw the keys to Lee, who caught them with surprise. "You've seen the way to get to the Cullen house in Jacob's mind, haven't you?" Jasper asked her. She nodded. "Then you should drive." Peter and Char joined Jasper in the bed of the truck while Lee and Seth climbed into the cab. All of them wondered what they'd find when they got there, hoping Carlyle would make the right choice. Carlyle heard the dial tone indicating Jasper had hung up the phone and cursed violently in his mind. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He heard the rational voice in his head, arguing that Jasper was right, that the newcomers needed to die to protect his mate and the rest of his family. That part of him was also horrified that had waited so long to pursue Bella's sting to allow the two newborns to change instead of simply dispatching them. He could have decapitated them both within 2 or 3 seconds and been on his way, coming back later to carefully detach the heads from Edward's throat if they didn't fall off on their own, instead of waiting the full 30 seconds to ensure the process of initiating the change was successful. The voice inside Cold believed he also then gave up the chase to save his daughter, allowing her to be injured and nearly killed, simply to return to Edward and the changing ones. He couldn't understand what had possessed him to sacrifice his own child's well-being to protect his enemy people who had been intent on beheading and burning him. He knew it was wrong, yet whatever was controlling his actions now drove him to gather up the 4 changelings and hurry them into the Volvo. "Tell Jasper I'm taking care of it," he commanded Edward before driving away. As soon as he hit the tarmac at the end of the driveway, he pressed the accelerator to the floor, traveling close to 150 miles per hour as often as possible, thankful for his enhanced reflexes that allowed him to maintain control of the vehicle as he zipped around the curves, overtaking other cars in his rush to get away. Riley awoke alone and abandoned, hidden on the edge of the airfield in Port Angeles. He groggily looked around in confusion as his memories assaulted him. The last thing he remembered was running away from the Swan girl with a tortured Victoria in his arms. He inhaled deeply, trying to catch his mate's scent, and quickly realized he didn't have the same skills had gotten used to having for the past 11 months. He put his hand on his chest, feeling the heart beating inside him in bewilderment. I'm human again. How did that happen? It must have been the Swan Witch and her merry band of freaks. They stole my mate and rendered me a pathetic weakling once again. Riley panicked. He took a few deep breaths to calm down, realizing he still had his backpack on him with his ID and the cash Victoria had stored with him. First things first, I need to become a vampire again so I can track down my mate, he decided. He fought through the hazy memories of his time as a supernatural creature, looking for something to help him. Victoria went to Mexico to learn about newborn armies. I'll go there. I'm sure they'll be happy to help me once they realize what a threat the Swan Witch is to our kind. He carefully made his way into the airport, finding a charter service on the premises, willing to fly him down to Portland, where he'd be able to catch a flight to Mexico. Once he flashed his bundle of cash, the two of them were in the air and on their way in record time. If the cursed Cullen scents are supposedly irresistible like Carlyle claimed, why haven't you or he succumbed to the temptation yet? Char wondered. The truck bumped along at what felt like a crawling pace to the vampires sitting in back of it, though they knew by the whining of the engine that Lee was pushing it as fast as it could go. Unfortunately, the truck was no longer capable of going more than 60 miles per hour. Jasper frowned. I don't know, perhaps because of the familial bonds we share. If that's what it is, then shouldn't Carlyle have drunk from the new people? Peter asked. Jasper nodded. Yeah, you're right, maybe because of our control the others have all been newborns. No, Victoria drank from Edward and started changing, Lee offered from the cab as she drove, so it doesn't affect just newborns. Thank goodness you guys chased after Victoria, otherwise she would gotten away, Jasper replied. Seth turned to look at him through the back window. She did get away, one of her men grabbed her and ran. But why didn't anybody pursue her? Why am I only just now being told this? Jasper growled. There's 8 of you, what are the rest of the wolves doing? Seth flinched, protecting the tribe in case there are any more newborns around. There were 15 newborns plus Victoria, Jasper snarled. You killed 3 on the reservation, we killed 5 on the way here and another a few minutes ago. I detected 4 other scents including Victoria's at Bella's house. How many attacked the Cullen house? 3, Seth answered. They killed 1 and 2 more were changing. That's all of them then, so Carlyle only has 4 new changelings. Victoria and her second in command got away, Jasper grumbled. Seth, you need to hop out and get your brothers on her tail. Peter and Char will go with you. Alice saw her going to the Volturi. We need to stop her before she can pee. Char, hold your breath until they're both ash. Lee pulled over on the side of the road to let Seth out of the truck. He stepped behind a tree to strip, then tossed the clothes back into the truck with his teeth. Jasper was worried about having the Whitlocks around the Cullens, uncertain of whether or not they'd be affected by the spell. He figured he'd also better get his newborn mate well away from them before she awakened, unsure of how the scent of their blood would affect her and unwilling to risk her changing into one of them. She was his first priority and he'd do whatever it took to protect her. Bella's truck pulled up in front of the Cullen house, the noise of the engine loud enough to alert those inside. Even with their human level of hearing, Lee slammed the driver's side door in disgust, hoping she'd never have to drive the ancient rust bucket again. With the speed she'd been introduced to with her new running skills, she found herself impatient with such a slow-moving beast. She could run much faster than it could drive even when still in her human form. Jasper carefully hopped out of the back, cradling Bella gently in his arms. Esme pulled open the front door, running out on the front porch. She gasped when she saw Bella's limp form. The Cullens hadn't been privy to Carlisle's phone conversation and thus had no idea what had happened to her. Edward was on Esme's heels and cried out when he saw Bella. "Oh no, what happened to her? Is she okay?" "Where's Carlisle?" Jasper growled. "He just left with the newly cursed," Rose declared, stepping around Edward to see what the fuss was about. Her eyes widened when she saw Bella's unconscious form. "He told me to tell you he was taking care of it," Edward relayed. "He better be," Jasper muttered, feeling uneasy. "Why didn't he just kill them here?" "Taking care of what?" Esme asked innocently. "Killing them," Jasper snarled. "What, no, Hess going to return them to their families?" Esme immediately protested. "He better not be," Jasper threatened, "or it'll rip him apart. I ordered him to kill them." "Why?" Esme wailed. "They're just children, they didn't know any better." Jasper shook his head. "Those children tried to kill you and your children, Esme. They attempted to kill your mate and they won't have felt any remorse over it. Either they're the enemy, you can't keep them, and they can't go home, even presuming they had a home in the first place. If Carlisle releases them, they'll expose us and bring the Volturi down on your entire family, not to mention the tribe. Hundreds of innocent men, women and children. An entire culture would be wiped off the face of the planet to render the shifter genom extinct. I know you don't want that on your conscience, Esme. Those 4 strangers, those enemy soldiers, have to die to protect your mate and your children. He better have just taken them away from the house to kill them because he didn't want to upset his mate, because if Hess trying to set them free, Hess going to be very sorry." Jasper thought, surely he can't be that stupid. He knows letting them go would risk his mate's life. He couldn't possibly be willing to hurt her in order to save 4 strangers. It goes against our instincts. "Better safe than sorry," Jasper decided. Turning to Lee, he murmured, "I need you to inform Seth and the others to keep an eye out for Carlisle and the others while they're tracking Victoria, just in case." She nodded, moving behind the truck to shift quickly, stripping off her clothes and shifting into wolf form. Edward had moved to get a closer look at Bella while Jasper was talking to Esme, and Emmett had come outside to join Rosalie on the front porch, wrapping his arms around her. "What's wrong with her?" Edward queried worriedly. At the same time Emmett boomed, "What happened to Bella?" "Chest changing," Jasper began. "What? How could you? Now the best she can hope for is this pitiful sterile half-life we've been given," Edward raged. "You've taken away everything that matters from her." Jasper wished he wasn't holding his beloved at the moment, so his hands would be free to inflict bodily harm on the boy. He was about to use his gift to torture Edward when, to his surprise and delight, Lee came marching around the front of the truck, back in human form again, and kicked Edward hard right between his legs from directly behind him. He sank to his knees with a high-pitched squeak, and she began smacking his head and shoulders with the palms of her hands. "You fucking imbecile, you ripped her heart right out of her chest, leaving her as a broken shell for months because you were too much of a pussy to man up to what needed to be done to keep her love forever. Unlike you, Jasper wasn't stupid enough to abandon his mate in the woods to die. Now Bella has a new mate who loves her enough to save her and keep her by his side, strong and happy for eternity, and you're still stuck on your own pathetic pity party," Lee shouted. "Grow up and get over it already. You can't control what you are, but you can choose what you do with it. You can choose to be miserable and hate yourself and your existence, or you can accept it and make the best of it. Happiness is a choice. You haven't had the balls to make misery as easy. Happiness takes effort." "How can you say that?" Edward protested, his voice cracking. "He stole her life from her. Bella was dying, she had a broken neck and her heart was failing." "We all heard it," Dipshit Lee countered. "She didn't have a life left to steal. I may not care for vampires as a rule, but it beats being dead. Besides, I'd never try to take away someone else's mate. I know how much it hurts to lose the ones you love." She shoved Edward face down into the dirt and stood over him, hands on her hips. Jasper sent her a wave of his pride, gratitude and approval, and she smirked. Edward groaned and rolled over, looking up at her crossly. "What do you mean? She can't be his mate?" Just before he spoke the last word, his eyes met hers, and he got lost in them. She froze in place, looking like she'd been hit by a tsunami. Suddenly she started shaking her head, muttering, "Oh no no no, fair not him, he just too wide and nerdy." Emmett laughed and began humming. Weird Al Yankovic's Wide and Nerdy Head had a field day when the song first came out, torturing Edward with it, claiming it described him perfectly. "I'm sorry, Lee," Jasper commiserated, trying to hide his amusement. He sensed Esme's confusion and informed her. Lee just imprinted on Edward. "Oh, that's wonderful," Esme gushed. "He finally won't be lonely anymore and he'll have the protection of the pack against any future vampire attacks." Edward stared up at Lee as if she was a goddess. She sighed and offered him a hand to help him up, unable to stay cross with him, no matter how much she wanted to be. "If you're going to be my man though, you'd better grow the fuck up and act like it, because I won't put up with any of that whiny self-loathing bullshit," she warned him. Yes dear," he replied, dazed. This definitely shoots the theory of imprinting for the purpose of procreation all to hell," she muttered to herself, "though what the universe was thinking to pair the two of us together, he'll never know." Peter, Char and Seth traced Riley's and Victoria's scents to the airport in Port Angeles, but both of the targets were already in the air. They moved back into the forest, and Seth quickly changed into his human form long enough to communicate the message from Jasper with regard to Carlisle and the changelings. Shit, Peter cursed, we've already lost the two most dangerous of these creatures, we sure as hell can't afford to lose any more. He and Seth started watching the road into Port Angeles several miles from the outskirts of the town, while Char ran into the local Walmart and grabbed a change of clothes and some food for Seth. At 3:58 p.m. the wolf and vampire duo spotted a Volvo approaching at high speed. Peter and Seth jumped out into the road, causing Carlisle to swerve to avoid them, sending the car careening off the road and into a tree. Carefully holding his breath, Peter tore open the passenger side door and started ripping off heads. He knew the humanoids were fast healers, but figured they wouldn't be able to recover from decapitation. Seth kept Carlisle in place guarding the driver's side door. The humanoids barely had time to panic before they were all dead, their blood filling the Volvo. As soon as they were all dead, Carlisle seemed to come out of a trance. Oh, thank heavens, I was under some kind of mind control and couldn't stop myself. I've been a prisoner in my own body for almost an hour. Now I was so afraid I was going to send these guys out into the world, which would have condemned my mate and the rest of my family, but I couldn't make myself stop. It was horrifying. Peter looked at him skeptically. I don't think that's going to help you much with the Major, considering you abandoned his mate to die. Oh no, I'll never forgive myself. How's Bella? Was he able to save her? Carlisle cried, looking nervously over at Seth. She's changing. No thanks to you, Peter grumbled. The wolves know all about it. Seth and Lee were there and heard her heart failing. They knew better than to get between the Major and his mate. Okay, good, Carlisle murmured, nodding appreciatively. Look, I know Jasper is going to be angry, and he has every right to be, but I assure you I wasn't in control of my own actions. It felt like he'd been possessed. I think I was under the influence of the witch's spell, though it didn't affect me the same way as it did the human drinkers. I was compelled to ensure the success of the transformation and to send the newly changed out into the world where they'd come in contact with other vampires, even though I knew it would be a death sentence for myself, my mate and my children to do so. Forget self-preservation, I could even act to save my mate, which is usually the strongest force in our world. Carlisle began to do damage control, quickly destroying the VIN vehicle identification number everywhere it was located in the Volvo, so the car couldn't be traced back to Edward. Peter ripped off the license plates while Carlisle opened the trunk and grabbed the duffel bag full of cash intended to help the changelings on their way. Peter flipped the car upside down hard, crushing the roof extensively. To explain away the detached heads, punctured the gas tank, then tossed over a lit match from the matchbook head picked up at the Swan's house. Char joined them shortly thereafter, watching the flames with approval, counting the number of torsos trapped inside the flattened vehicle to be sure they'd gotten them all. Amidst the craziness of the congratulations pouring out from the Cullens toward the new couple, Jasper carried Bella inside, intending to lay her down on his bed once he got in his room. Though he realized Carlisle had brought the female changelings in there, he snarled, smelling their scent on the bed covers, refusing to place his mate down on top of their stench. Snarling, he carefully laid Bella down on the carpet, then made quick work of stripping the bed down to the mattress. A few sniffs determined that the enemy's scents hadn't penetrated that far, so he put Bella on top of the bare mattress. I don't want my mate in this crazy house, Jasper decided, irritated and angry. He felt betrayed by Carlisle, and to some extent the rest of the family as well. He began packing up his belongings, grabbing everything of importance. When Peter and Char get back, we're out of here. Maybe the pack can protect them from their folly, but I doubt it. They're going down, and I'm not letting them take us down with them. The pilot expertly guided his plane into a long-term storage hangar at the Seattle airport. He smiled as he told his passenger this was his home airport, and he rented the space out on an annual contract so he'd be able to fly whenever he wanted. Now that he was retired, he often liked to go off on little adventures on the spur of the moment. Victoria absorbed all the information Shed gently pried from him without him, realizing how much he was revealing. He was divorced, and his children lived out of state. Nobody would miss him for several weeks. As soon as he cut the engine and moved to unfasten his harness, she stabbed him in the neck with the Phillips head screwdriver Shed found. She left him there to die, a shocked expression locked on his face, purloining his wallet and car keys. Shed discovered she needed a passport if she was going to fly to Italy, which she didn't have. Shed need to kill someone who had one, someone who wouldn't be missed in the time it would take for her to reach her destination. Shed dye her hair to match her victim, choosing someone whose features would match closely enough to avoid suspicion. She hopped in the deceased man's Audi and sped away, heading north toward Canada. Lee regaled her new in-laws with a tale of what Alice had seen happening to Bella in her vision. Her and her brother's subsequent chase of the vile newborn wad lost them by hiding in the river, and Jasper's heroic save of the young girl wad, been left hanging unconscious in a tree unseen by the wolves. As they raced past, focused on the scent they were following, Lee apologized to Jasper, knowing he would hear her even though he wasn't in the same room. "We had no idea Bella had been thrown into a tree, we thought the bastard still had her with him," she explained. "It never occurred to us to search the treetops for him, either after he got away. In hindsight, our focus on the ground is pretty short-sighted, we just knew that was the fastest way to travel for both our species." Esme was deeply disturbed when she discovered Carlisle had allowed her human daughter to be taken and had broken off pursuit. Once the wolves joined the chase, she knew from the things he'd let slip while he was watching the female soldiers writhe on the bed in the midst of transformation that he hadn't given chase right away, but had stayed to watch the evil harpies drink from Edward, the mental image of her husband simply standing there staring while their son was attacked and an evil rapist made off with their daughter haunted her. Jasper had shown her how much Carlisle loved her, but she was starting to have her doubts. The longer Carlisle stayed gone on his errand, Jasper had helped her see how much the family stood to lose if the other changelings got loose in the world, yet she was becoming more and more certain her husband was intending to let them go. She had always admired Carlisle's compassion for others, but it had never before been given at the expense of his own family. Before, how could he put the well-being of strangers over his own loved ones, she wondered, disheartened. She loved Edward, she did, but his personality had been wearing on her ever since she'd returned to a more human state. She no longer had endless amounts of patience and understanding to deal with his self-centered angst. She was quite relieved to pass on the mantle of responsibility for him to his new mate. Perhaps the pack will be better able to keep him from pursuing the type of youthful folly that led to the destruction of this family from the inside out, she thought bitterly. She hated this humanoid thing she'd become and blamed Edward, though she knew a large amount of the blame was her own. She'd been seduced into changing by promises of biological children belonging to her and Carlisle. As much as she loved her vampire children, the thought of growing a life inside of her, of holding a tiny bundle of joy in her arms, again of nursing a beloved babe, the miraculous creation of her and her mate's boundless love for one another, had been too incredible to resist. Edward had known the secret desires of her heart, having overheard many stray thoughts over the decades, and had used the knowledge against her, promising her the world. She'd believed his dreamy words over Jasper's dire warnings, trusting her first vampire son to know the witch's plans. Edward had claimed the witch had changed other vampires before him, wad then gone on to lead happy lives in the human world, no longer held back by bloodlust and fears of exposure. Edward hadn't informed any of them about the loss of his mind-reading talent until after they woke up from the change to Alice screeching about being unable to see the future anymore. At the time, none of the former vampires had stopped to think about how had known about the lives of the other vampires who'd gone before if he wasn't able to hear the witch's thoughts. It wasn't until after the ultrasound test proved the women barren that Edward had admitted he'd simply imagined all the things he'd said about the happy vampires who'd been changed before. It was nothing but pretty lies he'd told, his own wishful delusions. Esme thought of all the things she'd stressed over prior to her change, all the questions she'd asked in her mind, believing Edward could hear. Are you sure this is safe? Are you certain she doesn't mean us any harm? Are you positive we'll be able to have babies? Edward had looked her in the eye and nodded his head firmly, confidently, so she'd trusted him, believed him, taking comfort in his peaceful, happy, joyful, excited demeanor, a look she'd never seen on his face as a vampire had read the questions in her eyes instead of her mind and deliberately lied to her. She'd doomed herself and her mate with her choice to change, ignoring the worries voiced by her overly cautious, paranoid son, the one who didn't trust anyone. She'd dismissed Jasper's lack of faith as a result of his traumatic life history, the product of years living in strict survival mode. Jasper was right all along about the witch, Edward, Victoria, the pack, Bella and the newborns. Hess right not to trust Carlisle. Now too, she thought despairingly. I should trusted his survival instincts. Here's a reason Hess still standing, living free, when so many others are nothing but ash in the wind. Lee could see the wheels turning behind Esme's eyes, could see the doubts forming, and wondered what it meant for Esme's bond with Carlisle. Like the others, Lee had lost faith in the good doctor. She was the only one in the room who could hear Jasper packing upstairs and knew he planned to leave town with Bella, abandoning the former vampires to their own fate to protect himself and his mate. I don't blame him if I wasn't irrevocably tied to the pack. I'd grab Edward and leave too, she admitted to herself. Jasper and Lee alerted to the thunderous sound of multiple pairs of feet approaching at a rapid pace through the forest. Jasper was out of the house and ripping off Carlisle's arms before Lee knew what was happening. In the few seconds it took her to follow Jasper outside, Carlisle's legs were flying off in different directions as well. Lee saw a torn duffel bag lying on its side a few feet away from where Jasper was tearing into Carlisle, spilling bundles of $100 bills out onto the ground. She stared at it in awe, never having seen so much money in one place before. Part of her wanted to grab it and run, but she reminded herself she'd soon be rich, thanks to Jakey's little seer. Did you burn them? Jasper demanded, addressing the limbless torso. Whimpering in pain, Carlisle winced at the question, nodding then shaking his head. Peter did, they're all dead now. Jasper looked to Peter for confirmation. Peter nodded, then added, but Victoria and her second-in-command both got away. They took off in airplanes before we got there. I found out their flight plans and told Seth so he could send the other wolves to try and intercept them. Unfortunately, Victoria definitely had enough of a head start that they'll never make it to Seattle before she lands, but perhaps she can be traced from there. The timing will be closer for the other guy. Jasper growled and bit into Carlisle's neck, intending to decapitate him. Carlisle did say he was under a spell and had no control over his actions, Char quickly interjected. Carlisle's neck was only partially severed as Jasper stopped before removing it completely. He looked up at Peter and Char for more information. Peter sighed. Yeah, he claimed it felt like he was possessed and seemed pretty remorseful for the things he'd done, including the way he'd abandoned your mate. Jasper assessed Carlisle's emotions carefully. Were you really under a spell? He asked, using the full force of his gift to evaluate Carlisle's emotional reaction, or did you just say that hoping it would save your ass? Carlisle croaked, trying to respond verbally, but his vocal cords had been damaged by Jasper's assault, rendering him unable to speak. It didn't matter, though Jasper could read his emotions clearly enough. Jasper narrowed his eyes. Fine, I suppose you get to live after all. He leaned down and tore a chunk out of Carlisle's cheek with his teeth, then spit it out on the ground next to them. Carlisle made groaning sounds deep in his chest. Jasper dribbled his venom into the hole he'd created, deliberately scarring the tissue. That's for my mate, he growled, shoving the vampire away from him. Now you'll no longer have such a pretty face. It'll be a reminder for you of how much you failed her every time you look in the mirror. Esme gasped, having made it out of the house by then, but she didn't try to interfere. She'd known ever since she heard what happened that her husband would be punished. Seeing the bag full of money on the ground, she felt he deserved whatever Jasper dished out, knowing Carlisle had intended to release the changelings into the world. Still, she loved him while hating his actions, so when Jasper went back inside, leaving Carlisle lying there in the dirt, she hurried over to him. Taking pity on her, Peter quietly informed Esme of what Carlisle had said when they confronted him, giving her the ability to forgive him for what he'd done. She nodded and thanked him, then slowly worked on helping Carlisle piece himself back together. She put the chunk of cheek back in place, holding it. As it fused, it didn't heal evenly due to the foreign venom in the wound, leaving a jagged lumpiness. Even her human eyes could easily detect. Instead of repulsing her, she found she liked the irregularity to his features. It made him less perfect in her eyes, more human, more approachable. Esme had a hard time finding the missing limbs and then dragging them back to his side once she did, but she persevered, knowing he was in terrible pain the entire time. It helped that the missing parts were wriggling around, making noise as they tried to get back to their owner. Jasper watched Char carefully as she entered the house, noticing she was holding her breath like he'd warned her before. Go ahead and take a breath. I won't let you get close enough to drink from them if their scent affects you. Char cautiously inhaled. The former vampires were sweet smelling, but she didn't want to drink from them. She didn't lose herself. She sniffed, breathing in their scents, and relaxed, knowing she won't attack. Curious, is it the animal blood or the knowledge of what would happen that's preventing you from attacking? Jasper wondered aloud. Or perhaps your strength of mind. You've never been bonded to them as coven mates as I once was, so that rules that out. Peter came into the house holding his breath as well. Did you breath it all around the other changelings? Jasper inquired. Peter shook his head, but didn't speak. He'd used up all his air, informing Esme what Carlisle had said. Go ahead and try to breath now. I promise I won't let you drink from them. Peter nodded, trusting his sire. He inhaled and relaxed, realizing he was still under control. Now what? We're getting Bella out of here. I won't risk her attacking one of them when she awakens, Jasper informed them. The consequences are too severe. Peter and Char nodded in agreement, relieved to get away from the former vampires and the danger they represented. Emmett and Rosalie had been having a snack in the kitchen together, oblivious to the chaos around them. They entered the living room now and noticed Peter and Char had arrived. Well, if it isn't Peter and his pumpkin, Emmett cheered. How's it going, guys? Peter gave him a small half smile and shrugged. Not well, Emmy. Victoria and her minion got away. Shit, that's not good, Emmett exclaimed, looking worriedly over at Rosalie. Rose scowled. That stupid bitch is going to get us all killed. She turned and glared at Edward. This is all your fault, Edward. You lied to us about the witch, promised us babies and happy human lives, none of which is possible for us. At least now I understand why we're sterile. It won't be right to force a child to be a vampire magnet or to be raised by vampire magnets. Well, draw on the predators unintentionally and won't even know what hit us every time they attack. A baby could be injured or killed in the process. Hey, why didn't you two get sucked into the trance? Emmett wondered, drawing attention away from Edward before a fight could break out. I mean, it got Vicky right, so it's not just newborns. We think it's the animal blood, Char informed him, pointing to her yellow eyes to keep Em from saying anything about them being human drinkers in front of Seth and Lee. Em's eyes widened as he realized his usually red-eyed friends were sporting golden irises instead. If Vicky goes to the Volturi like Alice predicted, won't all of them get sucked into feeding from her too? Seth asked thoughtfully. Some of them will, Peter replied. There's no way of knowing which ones though. They don't have to keep up human pretenses, they're like breathing, so only the ones who smell her will be affected, the others will see what happens and react accordingly. I'm betting they'll contain the outbreak fairly quickly and then they'll be hunting for answers. We need to go back to the witch and make her change us back so we can defend ourselves, Emmett declared. Rosalie looked at him impressed. That's a good idea, honey. No, I don't want to change back, Edward protested horrified. That would break my bond with Lee. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to be happy with what I have and make the best of it. Lee looked like she was tempted to insist Edward go back to the witch after all. The hour made it to him, Peter choked out looking at Lee with dismay. Oh sugar, I'm so sorry, you deserve so much better. Lee smirked at him, not bothering to hide her personal agreement with that statement. Jasper came down the stairs with his bags just then and murmured too quietly for the humans to hear. On the other hand, Edward is a multi-billionaire, just like Alice. I'm sure he could grow up into a decent guy with the proper guidance, and as his wife Watts his is yours. Ed felt her intense longing for the money. She'd seen lying on the ground outside. Jasper had been quite wealthy in his own right before he met Alice and had always kept his own account separate from the Cullens, just like them. Had definitely benefited from Alice's visions on the best investments though, so he was a multi-billionaire now, too. Alice had made each and every one of them rich beyond their wildest dreams, so none of them would be hurting for money ever again, even without Alice's visions to help their wealth continue to grow. Lee raised her eyebrows in acknowledgement of Jasper's words, thankful Edward hadn't been able to hear them. Okay, I can put up with a lot of crap for several $billion. She turned to Edward with a smile. I'm so glad you've decided to embrace our bond. We should get married as soon as possible, don't you think? Edward beamed at her and nodded eagerly in agreement. He ran upstairs to his room where he located his mother's ring and hurried back down. Bedding down on one knee, Edward proposed. Lee, you're the most wonderful girl I've ever known in all my years on earth. Will you please do me the honor of becoming my beautiful beloved bride? Yes, Lee gushed, holding out her hand so Edward could place the ring on her finger. She realized Carlisle probably heard Jasper's words and didn't want him to try to talk Edward into some kind of prenuptial agreement. Come on, I want to introduce my fiancé to my mom. Great, Edward cheered, allowing her to pull him along behind her. Wait, Carlisle took my Volvo. Well, I still have the Aston Martin. Awesome, Lee cooed, eager to get him away to the reservation before Carlisle could interfere. Let's go. Carlisle watched helplessly from his spot in the grass as they sped away. Riley landed in Seattle and hurried into the terminal. He checked the board and found a flight to Houston. Getting ready to start boarding, he quickly bought a first-class ticket and raced over to the gate, getting there just in time for the last call. Paul and Embry were running to Seattle as fast as they could, but no matter how hard they pushed themselves, they couldn't arrive any sooner than 440 mere minutes after Riley's plane had cleared the runway. They started tracking his scent first, knowing they were close to his arrival time. They followed his trail all the way to the gate, but the plane was already in the air, even though they knew the destination. It didn't do them any good. They couldn't compete with a jet traveling over 500 miles per hour. By the time they could get there, Riley would be long gone. Next they followed Victoria's scent and realized she'd left in a car. Their delicate olfactory senses quickly led them to break into the hangar shed. Come out of finding the pilot shed left behind his body, cooled his blood, congealed. The tribe sent an anonymous tip to the police to investigate, hoping they'd realize the victim's car had been stolen and put out an APB all points bulletin which would hopefully lead to Victoria's arrest. The shifters knew Victoria wouldn't be expecting the pilot's body to be found so quickly and hoped she'd be careless about using his credit cards, which the police would be able to track. Go get my car from Seattle and head to the house near Eugene, Jasper ordered Peter and Char, handing over the keys from his pocket. The house there was secluded backing onto Willamette National Forest, which meant lots of fresh game available. It also helped that Oregon was close enough to provide help to the Cullens or the Quilutes should the need arise, but was far enough away to discourage random visits. Well, meet you there. Peter and Char nodded, giving Rose and Em a hug goodbye before leaving. Dang, I was really looking forward to hanging out with you, Em pouted to Peter. I don't think you could keep up any more, dude, Pete teased. You're now the equivalent of a 98-pound weakling. You really need to get your skills revamped if you want to run with the big boys. I'm gonna try, Em replied seriously. Well, if you can't, I reckon you can still be my little bro, even though you'll be the weakest and slowest one around, Pete offered. Em rolled his eyes. Not the weakest. Yes, you will be, Char interjected. We all know Rosie can take you down, no use pretending otherwise. Em pouted. What about Edward? Are you kidding? He'll be too busy playing with the puppies to hang out with us, Peter scoffed. Hess never liked us and the feeling's mutual, so I don't foresee him ever willingly choosing to be buddies with us. Peter turned to Seth. No offense, kiddo, I know you're a puppy too, but you're way cooler than Edwardo. Feel free to join our crew if you want. Char's always wanted a dog and you'd make a pretty cool mascot too. Char smacked Peter on the back of the head. Don't be mean, she growled. I wasn't, Pete whined. My offer was sincere. We could even build him his own doghouse on the property, so we won't have to worry about the smell. Char reached over to smack him again, but he ducked just in time. Seth grinned and shook his head. "Stop abusing me, woman," Peter complained. "I feel bad for the poor kid. He not only shares a house with his big sister with his super hearing and sense of smell, but he also shares a mindlink with her and will be privy to all the thoughts she has regarding her new husband and their marital relations. That's gotta be bad enough to drive a werewolf to consider living with vampires just for the peace of mind it would bring." Seth grimaced at the realization and shook Pete's hand. "I'll keep your offer in mind. I'd probably like to come visit and check on Bella at some point anyway." Peter nodded. "Okay, we've got a barn. It'd be nice to finally have an animal in it." Seth smirked as Char whacked her husband once again. As soon as Peter and Char were on their way back to Seattle, Jasper loaded his belongings into the Range Rover. The family usually only used when moving. It could hold a large quantity of items, but didn't have the speed or classy body style of the vehicles the vampires typically preferred. Once he double-checked to be sure he had everything he wanted and needed, including IDs and other critical items. From the safe in Carlisle's office, he laid the seats down in the back, making a bed for Bella. He made a pallet with a pile of blankets, then carried her downstairs and placed her gently on it, securing her in place so she wouldn't be knocked around by the movement of the vehicle. "I truly hope you are successful in reversing the curse," Jasper told Em and Rose as he hugged them goodbye. "Keep in touch, okay?" They nodded, sorry to see him go. "You better keep in touch too, Jazz," Em replied seriously. "I want to know how my baby sis is doing adjusting to her new life. I know y'all keep her safe and do your best to prevent her from doing anything she'll later regret." "Of course," Jasper responded, easily patting his brother gently on the back. "Take care of yourself too," Rose insisted, sniffling a little. "I will," he promised, hugging Rose one more time. "Thanks for protecting Bella," he told Seth. "I don't even want to imagine what would have happened to her if you hadn't scared that little bastard away long enough for me to get to her." "I'd never allow that to happen to somebody if I could prevent it," Seth murmured, smiling sadly. "He was truly a monster and deserved to be destroyed. It's not what he is, but what he does, the way he treats others, that's the measure of a man." Rose looked at him thoughtfully before slowly nodding in agreement. She found herself liking the young shifter and appreciating his perspective, which helped her adjust her own. She realized it was easy to let go of her previous hostility toward the tribe without her natural instincts driving her behavior. Besides, with Alice and Edward marrying into the tribe, it was no longer a matter of us versus them. The shifters were family now too, albeit in-laws, and she'd always been loyal to her family, even the members she didn't particularly like. Jasper cautiously approached Carlisle and Esme, holding his anger in check, so he walled to attack again. "I'm taking Bella to the Whitlock house in Oregon to finish her change. We can't risk anybody she knows seeing her, and if she slipped it not only cause problems with the wolves, but it would absolutely devastate her if she accidentally attacked someone she knew." He didn't need to finish his sentence. They all knew Bella would never forgive herself and would have a hard time recovering if she killed somebody she cared about or somebody special to those she cared about. Esme wrapped him in her loving embrace. "We understand, Jasper, we love you both and want what's best for both of you. Please keep us up to date with Bella's progress and let us know as soon as it's safe to be around her again." Jasper agreed, then turned to face Carlisle. "You need to fix this mess, Carlisle, before the Volturi find out about it, because I can guarantee you won't like their way of solving the problem." Carlisle gave a tense nod, knowing Jasper was right. After Jasper left, Seth took pity on Carlisle and decided to go hunting for him to get him the blood necessary for him to fully heal. "Don't worry, Dr. Cullen," he reassured the doctor. "Now that Lee has accepted the bond and stopped fighting, it shall end up falling head over heels for Edward. His happiness will be her top priority, just as her happiness will be his top priority. That's how the imprint works. It guarantees a successful relationship." Carlisle relaxed upon hearing that, no longer worried about his firstborn and knowing the pack would protect Edward with their lives, now that Lee's life was irrevocably tied to his. Gathering strength from the blood of the 3 deer Seth had brought him, he went inside the house and addressed his wife and his 2 remaining children. "We need to go confront the witch like Emmett suggested Esme, and I will go too." Esme had come inside once Seth brought the first deer, not wanting to watch Carlisle feed. She told Em and Rose about Carlisle being caught under a spell and not being responsible for his actions. The 2 of them were not as quick to forgive as Esme had been, but thought it best to have his protection on their journey, so decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Everyone hurried to pack, eager to get on their way. Leaving Bella inside the SUV, Jasper hurried into Chief Swan's house and began collecting everything he thought Bella would want from her room. He only grabbed a few changes of clothes, concentrating mainly on books, pictures, jewelry, and any other keepsakes he thought might be precious to her. He found the things Edward had left under her floorboards and grabbed them too, just in case. As soon as he had everything loaded into the Range Rover, he called Charlie, letting him know he would be waiting at Charlie's house to speak to him. He warned Charlie that something had happened, but that he wasn't comfortable discussing it over the phone. Charlie read between the lines and raced home immediately. His shift would been over at 5 o'clock anyway, so it was no big deal for him to leave a few minutes early. "Where's Bella?" Charlie asked as soon as he was out of his cruiser. Jasper led him over so he could peer in through the tinted windows of the SUV, where he saw Bella lying still and silent in the back. Is she? He couldn't bring himself to voice his fear out loud. "She's not dead," Jasper murmured quietly, "but she's not human anymore either." Charlie gulped and paled. "What happened?" "Victoria attacked today while I was in Seattle picking up my friends from the airport. She couldn't have picked a better time, because my friends are seasoned warriors just like I am, and together we would have easily decimated her army before she could have done any damage," Jasper informed him, then sighed. "Unfortunately without us here there were several casualties. The wolves reported 2 humans were killed on the reservation before they could destroy the 3 vampires who attacked there. The Cullens were also attacked at the same time, as were Edward and Bella. Not sure why he was here with her, but it ended up saving her life because they went after him first before going after her, buying her a little time. One of the newborns ran off with her intending to torture her before draining her," Jasper continued, deciding not to mention the word rape to Bella's father. The situation was already hard enough for the poor man to handle, as it was without needing to know just how bad it could have been. Luckily the wolves arrived and gave chase, scaring him into dropping Bella in his attempt to save his own skin. Sadly, the force with which he tossed her aside broke her neck. By the time I got to her she was dying. The one who had taken her had managed to ditch the wolves and had circled back around intending to grab her again. I took him out and chose to change her rather than let her die." Lee and Seth were the ones who chased away the newborn and were present to see the damage and to hear her heart failing. They can attest that it needed to be done to keep from losing her completely. Charlie looked at him silently for a few moments, giving himself time to process Jasper's words. "Thank you for saving her," he whispered gratefully, looking back at Bella with tears in his eyes. "So now what?" "I'm taking her to a house I have in Oregon," Jasper admitted. "She can't stay here. She'll be different when she awakens, different enough that people would notice. She can't be around humans either for at least a year, maybe several. She won't have control over her bloodlust, and the temptation to drink from them would be too great. I know it would devastate her if she accidentally killed someone while overcome by the thirst, so I need to keep her isolated." "Take me with you," Charlie pleaded. Jasper sighed and shook his head. "I can't." Charlie, "She'd unintentionally kill you and would never forgive herself once she'd realized what she'd done." "Change me too," Charlie argued. "She won't hurt me if I'm a vampire too." Jasper raised his eyebrows in surprise. He quickly sent Charlie some calm, helping to diffuse the panic the man was feeling. "Charlie, that's not something I can just do on a whim. You're the chief of police. If you and Bella both up and disappear on the same day, it will cause problems in the human world. There would be an investigation. Remember, our laws dictate we not expose ourselves to the humans by calling attention to ourselves. I need you to cover for Bella. Say she decided to move back in with her mom to get away from Edward because he kept harassing her or something like that." Jasper got a text message and quickly checked it. "Besides, we need your help in an official capacity. Victoria got away. She's humanoid, but she killed the pilot who got her out of Port Angeles before we could get there and stole the man's car. The wolves reported the crime anonymously to the Seattle police, so we need you to monitor the police channels. We need to know if the car is located and where. If you get us the information on her victim, we can hack into the credit card database and figure out where she is based on when she uses the stolen cards. If she makes it to the Volturi, it could go very badly for all of us, so we need to try and intercept her if at all possible." Realizing his help was needed just the way he was eased Charlie's concerns about losing his daughter due to her transformation. He was no less necessary or valuable simply because of his human state. "Of course I'll get right on it," Charlie agreed. "I'll do whatever I can to protect Bella." Jasper nodded. "Good. I couldn't change you right now. Even if I wanted him too thirsty, it'd be just as likely to kill you as change you. I've expended too much energy fighting others of my kind today and pumping my venom into Bella. If you were dying, I might try it anyway, but you're not. You're strong and healthy. If you still want to consider being changed later, or if we can't stop Victoria and need to protect you from the Volturi, well, cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll have to talk to the wolves too, because it would be a violation of our treaty with them to change you. Bella's my mate, my other half, and was dying, so she was an exception. If you can get their approval or it's deemed important for your safety, Bella and I will let you know exactly what it means to change and the sacrifices that entails, so you can make an informed decision. I will warn you, it can be a very long, lonely existence without a mate, even with good friends, family and a lover beside you." Charlie sighed and nodded. "I want to speak to her every day on the phone. Maybe we can do the whole Skype thing too. I'll get the new deputy to show me how to set up my computer for it." Jasper handed Charlie a wad of bills. "Here, get a new laptop and the best high-speed internet connection you can. Nearly all laptops come with a built-in camera, even the cheaper ones. Just make sure you get a decent one. Skype is free to download and fairly intuitive to use. The better your connection and the camera, the more smooth the movements will appear on your screen as you talk to one another." Charlie eyed the money uncomfortably. Jasper rolled his eyes and shoved the money in Charlie's hand. "It's for Bella. I've got billions more, so you needn't worry about me." Charlie blushed and nodded, pocketing the cash. "I'll take good care of her." Jasper smiled. "She's my soulmate, Charlie, my everything. She already owns my heart and has entrusted her heart into my safekeeping. I'll gladly give her anything she wants on a silver platter and will always protect her with my life. I'm one of the most gifted vampires and one of the fiercest fighters in existence, probably the only one who could go up against a Volturi and be confident of coming out. On top, now that she's like me, I'll never leave her side and nobody will ever be able to hurt her again." Charlie looked him straight in the eye, a feat few beings in the world, whether human, wolf or vampire, could accomplish. Once he was satisfied with Jasper's sincerity, he smiled, relieved. "Thanks, son, that means the world to me." Charlie watched Jasper drive away with his precious daughter bundled up safely in the back, then headed back to the station, determined to do his part to eliminate the threat to his child. At the Bow Hill rest area between Mount Vernon and Bellingham, Victoria found a Canadian couple on vacation taking a road trip in their RV heading toward California. She saw them taking their dog for a walk and asked the woman for a tour of the RV, saying she wanted to purchase one for her parents. As an anniversary present, the woman happily obliged, and Vicky snapped her neck while they were inside, hiding the body under the covers on the bed as if she was sleeping. Vicky then hurried out and over to the man, quietly telling him his wife had suddenly started throwing up and was requesting his attention. Worried, the man hurried over to the RV, calling for his wife. He raced inside and went over to where he saw her lying in the bed. By the time he realized she was dead, it was too late. Vicky clubbed him over the head with a crowbar several times, aiming for his temples. Once she was sure he was dead, she killed the small yapping dog too, then pulled the keys out of the man's pocket and shut the bedroom door, locking in the three corpses together. She found the woman's passport in her purse, along with her ID and credit cards. She got behind the wheel of the RV and headed toward Canada, stopping at the Walmart in Bellingham to get hair dye and a pair of reading glasses. Unfortunately for those pursuing her, she paid with cash. She then used the RV's bathroom to dye her hair, rinsing off in the shower, then fixed her hair in a similar style to the one shown on the passport photo. She had no trouble crossing the border into Canada and headed straight for Vancouver. At 7:03, she entered the Vancouver airport and by 7:45 p.m. she was on her way to Florence with layovers in Amsterdam and Paris. At 6:15, a routine check of the Bow Hill rest area revealed the abandoned stolen vehicle sought by Washington State Police. Charlie quickly alerted the wolves, who sent Paul and Embry from where they were waiting in Seattle. The shifters made it to the rest area by 6:40, but quickly realized Victoria had left in another vehicle, obscuring her scent trail. Knowing she was heading north, they decided to run that way and picked up her scent again in the parking lot of the Walmart in Bellingham. Keeping in touch with the reservation, Jasper suggested Victoria was heading for the Vancouver airport. Paul and Embry did the best they could, but the area over the border was heavily populated and they could no longer travel in wolf form, particularly once they got close to the city. Unfortunately, two young men lacking shirts and shoes in Canada in March was almost as conspicuous as horse-sized wolves, forcing them to travel at human pace. Peter and Char had arrived in Seattle to pick up Jasper's car at 5:15 and had encountered the wolves there at the airport. Paul was disgusted with himself at finding himself liking the male vampire and wanting to be friends with him instead of ripping off his head, thought Lee and Seth, both delusional when had encountered their thoughts regarding Peter, but soon found himself no better. Peter had joked around with them, and both Paul and Embry had felt like he was just one of the guys, feeling a sense of camaraderie with him, as if he were one of the pack. Seeing the cessation of hostility from the shifters as soon as he moved in range, Peter was once again thankful for the gift that protected both him and his mate from any who wished them harm. After checking in with Jasper, Peter and Char decided to stay and help track Victoria, hacking into the credit card companies on Peter's laptop using the airport's Wi-Fi connection. Unfortunately, they weren't able to find anything since Vicky stuck to cash transactions. When word came about the car, they decided to give chase as well. They cold run as fast as the wolves, but quickly caught up to Paul and Embry once over the border. Char had taken a moment to run into Walmart and figure out what Vicky had purchased, so she now knew the former vampire was sporting brown hair, while in the store shed purchased outfits for the shifters, guessing they'd likely soon be in a predicament similar to Seth's and Lee's earlier that day. She tossed a bag of clothes and shoes to the shifters as they passed them, able to move more quickly due to years of experience, avoiding being spotted by nearby humans while hunting the vampires, had the added advantage of being able to endure brief bursts of speed in excess of 1,000 miles per hour to escape detection, becoming nothing more than a blur. The wolves were fast, but human eyes are able to detect and track things moving even at speeds of 300-500 miles per hour, especially from a distance. Unfortunately, it still wasn't fast enough. By the time they got to the airport, Vicky's plane had just departed. A little investigation quickly determined she was indeed on her way to Italy. Feeling lost, they reported their failure to Jasper, who relayed the information to Charlie. After finding out the vampires had traced Vicky's route through the airport by her scent, Chief Swan told them to check the parking garage and find the vehicle Vicky had used so they'd know what name Victoria was traveling under. Peter and Char, accompanied by the wolves, located the RV and smelled the corpses inside. They put in another anonymous call to the local authorities, reporting hearing a scream coming from inside the vehicle. Police investigated and found the bodies inside, as well as the remnants of the hair dye. It took several hours, but the authorities in Amsterdam were prepared to intercept Victoria as soon as the plane landed. Relieved, Peter and Char said goodbye to the wolves and headed back to Seattle to pick up Jasper's car and join him in Oregon. Everyone relaxed, believing the problem to be contained. Jasper curled up on the bed around his mate, trying to ease her pain through the transformation, absorbing the waves of agony, the burning hell into himself. Peter and Char vigilantly ran patrols, keeping their brother and his mate safe. While they were both incapacitated, Peter tracked Riley's progress, becoming alarmed when he realized the boy had subsequently booked a flight into Mexico City. There was no way to catch up to the boy, and it was too dangerous to send any of their allies into the area to try and retrieve him. Peter debated calling to warn Maria, but his hatred of her and the other warlords won out, making him decide to leave her to her fate. He figured Riley would get killed by someone watching what happened to others from a distance, someone smart enough to hold their breath. If the authorities stop Victoria, then the Volturi will trace this issue back to the southern warlords, thinking it originated there, rather than with the Cullens. He hoped maybe it will help stop all the bloodshed down there too. The Cullens were surprised to find they cold land at the La Vanguardia airport in Meta, Colombia, like they had the last time they'd gone to visit the witch. They were informed there was some kind of state of emergency in the area. Instead, they had to land in Bogota and travel the rest of the way to La Europe, the hometown of the witch, by car. As they got closer to her little house set back in the woods, they noticed how deserted the area seemed. Many shops in town were closed, some even had boards over their windows. There were few cars on the roads, and inhabitants of nearby houses watched them suspiciously peeking out from behind their curtains. Nobody lingered on sidewalks, and there were no children playing in the yards. It was a far cry from the journey they had undertaken less than 2 months prior. What happened here? Carlyle wondered, noticing the changes far more than his companions. They found the witch's house, but it appeared vacant. There was no life inside, no movement, no heartbeat. Carlyle decided to search it anyway, looking for clues as to her whereabouts. To his fear and dismay, he found her corpse lying on her bed. From the state of decomposition, he could tell she'd been dead for over a week. On the bedside table was a sealed envelope addressed to him. He took it, glancing around uneasily. Nervously, he opened it, finding a letter and a wooden bead inside. He pulled out the note, leaving the bead alone, deciding he wanted to know what it said before the rest of the family saw it, so he could prepare himself for their reactions. At first glance, he was relieved to note it was in an ancient tongue, one he had studied, but that his family members would not be able to translate. The contents of the letter were completely unexpected though. Carlyle Cullen. I am writing this on my deathbed. I expected to feel triumph when you returned to me, knowing you would once you realized what I had done to your family, what they had become. I sneered at your desires to become parents, thinking you couldn't possibly understand the love and sacrifice necessary, justifying to myself my trickery at your expense. The curse erases the effects of the venom, restoring vampires back to the state they were in prior to being changed, then alters their DNA to become something different. The creature they become has blood that carries the power of the curse within it, blood that calls to vampires to drink it. I was thrilled when my first victim decided to call the rest of his coven to join him, but I was shocked when you all reunited with him, treating him as a beloved son and brother, unfazed by the blood that was supposed to call to you. At first, I thought I had done something wrong in the spell, but as I looked at your group's unusual yellow eyes and listened to your stories, I soon realized the reason. The spell calls for the cursed blood to be irresistible to those whose hearts no longer beat and who carry the blood of humans in their bellies. I thought about changing the spell to include animal drinkers, but your aura was so pure it confused me. I didn't understand how an evil demon, a vampire, could appear to be a creature of the light. So instead I cast a spell on you to force you to promote the exposure of the curse to others of your kind, to encourage the spread of it, even after you realized what it was and would mean for your race, your mate and your coven. I knew you would return to me angry, afraid, upset. I thought I would laugh in your face. I was so full of pride and self-righteousness. Even though I knew this was dark magic, I was certain I was doing what was right for humankind, for my descendants. I developed a cough after changing your firstborn, but thought nothing of it. I had herbs and spells that helped keep illness at bay, kept me from feeling bad enough to stay home in bed. I went about my business, visiting my family, my friends, my clients. I paid my bills, ran errands, socialized with my neighbors. My own great-grandchildren were the first to die, followed by my granddaughter the next day. People all around me began dropping like flies. My daughter came and confronted me distraught, broken, asking what I had done. It was the people who knew me best who fell first, my inner circle. But it quickly spread from there. I was confused, not making the connection until someone said the words flu epidemic. I made calls, then trying to get anyone to listen, trying to warn them what they faced, without being able to tell them how I knew. My hubris cost the lives of hundreds of innocent people, probably thousands by the time it's run its course. I changed your son back to the state he was in when he was changed, heavily contagious and dying of the Spanish flu. The subsequent changes to his DNA from the curse healed the illness, while my status as a witch kept me healthy enough to spread those germs to my entire community day after day. The ultimate carrier. My daughter passed away next, then my son and my son's children. Before long I had no descendants left to protect. I had done more damage in a matter of weeks than vampires had done to my area over decades. In fact, I brought vampires to my hometown in droves. They came for the easy pickings the epidemic brought them. I saw them passing through, putting people out of their misery when they got close to the end. With so many dying, there wasn't time for the authorities to worry about those who went missing or who showed up at the morgue already drained of blood. It then occurred to me, what if the curse hit someone who was changed during the time of the bubonic plague? I could inadvertently be responsible for the re-release of the Black Death onto the human populace, or any other deadly virus for that matter. For the first time I truly understood how my plan to save humanity could do more harm than good to the very species I was trying to protect. Instead of triumph, I am filled with dismay. I cannot fix what I have done. I hope you find a way to stop it before any more lives are lost, human or otherwise. My herbs and spells could only do so much, especially once I lost my will to live. I have nobody left to bring meaning to my life. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I finally understand what that means. I danced with the devil, used dark magic to cause harm to your family, while convincing myself I was doing the right thing. You dedicated your existence to saving humans, using your supernatural skills and talents to do what others couldn't. I thought I was doing the same, but as I lie here ready to face judgment in the afterlife, I'm forced to realize the difference between us and the choices we made. My soul is now stained in inky black with the deaths of innocents, while yours glows brighter than the sun. While I can't reverse the curse on your family, the magic is too powerful. I can reverse the spell I placed on you, allowing you to deal with the situation as you see fit, instead of you being forced to promote my original goals. Once your skin touches the bead I've enclosed for you, the spell will lift from your mind, restoring your faculties to your own control. I have decided I must trust your judgment at this point over my own in how to deal with the mess I've unintentionally created for the human world, even if it means allowing your species to continue to exist. Paola Molina. Debating with himself over the wisdom of his action, Carlyle took out the bead. He didn't feel any different after touching it and hoped it did what the witch had promised in her note. At this point, he knew it was distinctly possible she had lied and had cast another spell on him to get him to do her bidding instead of setting him free. He took the letter and left the house with a heavy heart. Coming out to the car where his family was waiting, the suspicion, the deserted streets, the closed stores all made sense. Now people were dropping like flies, just as they'd done nearly 100 years before the first time had lived through the Spanish flu epidemic. Medicine had come a long way since then though, and once they'd identified the strain causing the epidemic, everyone else in the area and surrounding areas would have been vaccinated against it to keep it from spreading. As he approached the car, he heard a rustle in the woods behind the house and heard a familiar voice call his name. Stop, hold your breath, don't come any closer, it'll come to you in a moment, he quickly replied, worried about spreading the curse to his friends. He hurried over to the car and called through the window glass, don't open the door, our Amazonian friends are in the woods and I don't want them to catch your scent. I'm going to go apprise them of the situation and will return shortly. His family nodded their understanding, glad he was protecting their friends, and settled in to wait as patiently as they could. Carlyle ran into the woods following the Amazonian women's scents. He quickly shared with them what the witch had done to his family and what the curse meant for the rest of the world. Give the letter to Kachiri, Zafrina ordered, recognizing the language on the page Carlyle was holding. Her father was the shaman of our tribe, perhaps she can help. Kachiri perused the contents, then her eyes unfocused as if she were in a trance as she began chanting under her breath. After several minutes she recovered and solemnly met Carlyle's eyes. There is a cure for the curse, but it will not be easy to find. What is it? It'll help, Carlyle eagerly replied, hope filling him. It is the venom of the vampire whose heart still beats inside his chest. Carlyle's face fell, his shoulders drooped. Where on earth can we find a vampire with a beating heart, he wondered. Charlie informed everyone that the Amsterdam police reported taking custody of Victoria at the airport. It would take a few days to work out extradition details, but everyone was feeling more confident that the situation was under control. Peter broke through Jasper's pain-filled haze to inform him of the news, as well as what had learned from Carlyle regarding the witch and Riley's location. As soon as our family is safe, we'll put in a call to the Volturi citing suspicious activity in Mexico, Jasper whispered through clenched teeth before succumbing to the pain once again. The vampire whose heart still beats, Emmett asked, you mean like a changing vampire? Carlyle's eyes widened, I hadn't thought of that, asked Kachiri. Carlyle was getting his family settled so he could go with the Amazonian coven in search of the elusive cure. As soon as he was sure they had everything they needed, he raced back to his friends. Is it the venom of a changing vampire, he inquired excitedly. He knew Bella was mid-change. If that was the solution, he'd bring everyone back to her. Kachiri shook her head. No, their venom is no different from a mature vampire and would have the same result. Carlyle's face fell. Where can we find a vampire whose heart still beats? There is only one who is venomous, Kachiri replied, a male vampire born of a human woman with blood in his veins and venom in his mouth. How is that even possible? Carlyle wondered, confused. Was the woman exposed to venom while pregnant? Defrina shook her head. There is a male vampire, an incubus, who chooses to impregnate human women, collecting the children born of the union. He leaves the mothers to die instead of changing them, then leaves the oldest of his children to raise her siblings. Well, he goes about his business unencumbered. Only one of the children is venomous, the only male. You mean it really is possible for a vampire to impregnate a human female? Carlyle blanched, realizing Bella had been right. He could have had a child with his beloved Esme if he'd stayed and courted her instead of running away when he first found her. The three women nodded solemnly, though we don't know of anyone other than Johim who has done so, Senna admitted. This needs to be kept strictly confidential, Carlyle's Afrina insisted. We don't need vampires all over the world kidnapping and impregnating human females and then letting them die just so they can have children to raise. The pregnancy is very hard on the poor human, and the baby chews its way out of her stomach, ripping open her abdomen to get out. The pregnancy only lasts 1 month with the baby growing rapidly, its movements causing bruises and broken bones toward the end, when the woman must consume blood to feed the baby or be drained from the inside. If the woman doesn't get a source of blood in time, she and the baby both die before the baby is old enough to survive on its own. Kachiri nodded. For each one Johim has successfully impregnated, there have been dozens of females who were killed, either in the process of having sex from undernourishment during pregnancy or to protect the secret after they failed to become with child in a timely fashion. Johim seduces his conquests, but many other vampires would resort to rape instead to get what they want. Carlyle winced, imagining what would happen if the Volturia Romanians found out this was possible. It would be the immortal child fiasco all over again. Speaking of which, what are these hybrid children like? Are they not immortal children? The Amazonians told Carlyle everything they knew about the hybrids as they ran toward the last known location of the only male. They then explained how Nahul had hated himself for over a century, blaming himself for the death of his mother due to his violent birth, until Kachiri had informed him that Johim Cold easily saved his mother by changing her into a vampire at the time of birth. If he'd bothered to stick around and take care of her instead, Johim had deliberately abandoned the poor pregnant girl to suffer alone, viewing her simply as a means to an end and not wanting to have to deal with the consequences of the lies had told her by having her around for eternity. Nahul and his aunt Yulin had then realized the fault lay entirely with Johim, that he was the true monster, the only villain of the story. The two of them were able to stop resenting Nahul, recognizing the child was innocent and shouldn't be blamed for the father's sins. Now the two were much closer than they had been before, especially now that Yulin stopped secretly blaming Nahul for her sisters. The Demise she no longer wished had never been conceived, recognizing from Kacharis' words that she would have lost her sister to death either way due to Johim's need to keep a secret, but this way her sister lived on through the child shed loved so dearly. Carlyle was fascinated and couldn't wait to meet Nahul, his scientific curiosity going haywire at the thought of being presented with an entirely new supernatural species. Riley hurried out of the airport as soon as he could after his plane landed in Mexico City, not having any luggage to delay him inside. He saw a row of taxis waiting to deliver travelers to their destinations and recognized one of the drivers as a vampire. He eagerly dove into the back of that cab, ignoring the other drivers trying to coax him their way. The driver quickly pulled out into traffic before his prey could change its mind and asked the boy where he wanted to go. "Take me to your master," Riley calmly informed him. "I have urgent news." The driver pulled over to the side of the road and turned to look at his fare with a raised eyebrow. "Are you loco, senor?" he asked. Riley rolled his eyes. "No, I know you're a vampire." Acting quickly, the driver reached around the seat, yanked Riley forward, and promptly began draining him. Shortly thereafter, Riley awoke from unconsciousness with no memory of getting into the cab. The last thing he could remember was heading out of the airport. He saw the driver sprawled across the two front seats, whimpering and convulsing. Figuring the guy was having a seizure, Riley got out and walked back to the airport. He got into another cab with a human driver this time and asked to be taken to the cheapest hotel in the area. He knew it would be the perfect feeding grounds for vampires and hoped to find one. He didn't bother checking into a room once he arrived, choosing to walk around the neighborhood instead. After about an hour he got frustrated and slipped into the shadows of an alleyway between two buildings. "Hey, are there any vampires around here? I need to deliver a message to Maria Chess, one of the warlords around here who makes newborn armies," Riley calmly stated, trying to make his voice carry. It wasn't loud enough to be overheard by any humans in the vicinity, but was designed to grab the attention of any supernatural beings within a mile radius. Sure enough, two vampires appeared in front of Riley within seconds. "How do you know about our kind?" the first asked menacingly. The second made the mistake of trying to sniff Riley to see if he'd had contact with other vampires. One hint of Riley's scent was all it took for him to pounce and begin drinking the cursed elixir. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" the first guy growled. "We need to interrogate him before you drain him, idiot." He tugged on his companion but was ignored, so he ripped off the offender's right arm. The feeding vampire didn't even seem to notice, which really threw his comrade. What the hell? He tried once again to get his fellow soldier to stop drinking, ripping off the guy's other arm. The one who'd been drinking suddenly fell backwards and started screaming and flailing around. "Shut up," the first guy hissed angrily. "You're going to expose us." He stepped on his coven mate's neck, damaging the voice box and preventing him from screaming. Turning back to the unconscious human lying crumpled on the dirty ground, he unthinkingly inhaled, then promptly pounced. When Riley awoke a minute or two later, he found himself in an alley he didn't remember entering. He noticed one man whining and twitching nearby, and another silent one with blood and other fluids leaking out of the holes where his arms should have been. "Fucking addicts," Riley thought to himself, "must ambushed me, then fought amongst themselves over my stuff." He dusted himself off and decided to try out his plan of luring in a vampire to take him to Maria a few blocks away from the carnage here. He didn't want any potential allies distracted by the spilled blood. The taxi driver awoke to a police officer knocking on his window. He cautiously rolled it down, then shuddered in horror as he realized he was somehow human again. He had no memory of Riley and had no idea how it had happened. "Are you okay?" the officer asked suspiciously. "It looked like you were having a seizure." "I fell asleep. Bad dream," the former vampire lied. "Had a rough night last night. I think I'll clock out now and head home, get some rest. Might be coming down with something." "Good idea," the officer agreed. "I don't think you should be driving in your condition." "Thanks for your concern," the driver politely replied, gritting his teeth with the knowledge of his current vulnerability. As soon as the officer moved away, the taxi driver took off back to his home base, wanting to be turned back into a vampire. In the alleyway, only one of the former vampires regained consciousness. The other had bled out while he transformed. The curse cold repaired the damage to his neck, but it cold regrow his arms for him, especially with no blood left in his system. The one who awoke had no memory of what led him and his compatriot to be in the alley in the first place. He vaguely recognized his buddy, though his memories of his time as a vampire were now somewhat fuzzy. Conscious of the need to keep a secret, he quickly disposed of the body, then returned to the compound feeling vulnerable and frightened in his human form. He wanted both protection and to be able to warn his coven mates of the unknown danger. Someone must have found a newborn with the gift of making vampires human again, he thought worriedly. A few hours later, frustrated with his lack of success, Riley decided to obtain a car and travel up to Monterey. Thinking he might have better luck there, he left a trail of changing vampires everywhere he stopped for food or gas along the way. Within 24 hours of his arrival in the country of Mexico, there were more humanoids than vampires roaming the countryside. Once whole covens had been changed, most of the newborns decided to return home to their families and rejoin their human lives. The older vampires and the newborns, who hungered for the power and strength of being something supernatural, chose to travel specifically searching for other vampires, rapidly spreading throughout Central America and soon spilling over into North and South America. The Amsterdam police boarded Victoria's plane. As soon as it arrived at the gate, they pulled her out of her seat and arrested her on the spot. They escorted her through the back hallways of the airport to a small interrogation room. Along the way, they passed two vampires who were trawling the airport, looking for tourists who wouldn't be missed to be their dinner. The first caught the siren scent and moved to attack, but was held back by his companion Sven. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Lucas hissed, having never seen his 853-year-old companion risk exposure this way. Sven continued struggling, unable to respond, oblivious to Lucas' attempts to call him back to reason. It must be his singer, Lucas realized, having witnessed that phenomenon. Before deciding to help his friend, he pulled Sven into an empty bathroom, pulling off his arms and legs so he couldn't follow and expose them. Striking quickly while no one else was around, he snapped the necks of the prisoner and the two officers, pulling all three of them inside the bathroom where his friend was waiting and dropping them in a heap on the floor. He locked the door so no one could disturb them, then helped Sven fuse his limbs back in place. He leaned back and watched as Sven attacked the woman the moment he could move. Smiling to himself, Lucas moved the officers over next to the drain in the floor. He slit the neck of the first one, letting some of the blood spill out over the floor and run down the drain to set the scene. Just as he was about to start feeding, he heard a heavy thunk behind him. Whipping around, he saw Sven whimpering and twitching on the floor while the woman he had been feeding from lay still a few feet away, her heart still beating. Inhaling in shock, he ignored the spilled blood right beside him and went for the prone female. When Victoria regained consciousness, she saw the dead officers what arrested her on the plane and smiled triumphantly. She didn't know who the writhing men were what attacked the policeman for her, but she was thankful nonetheless. As a result, she chose to let them live. She wriggled her way over to the police corpses, finding the keys to the handcuffs and unlocking herself. Thinking quickly, she removed the uniform off of the smaller man and dressed in it herself. She hid her hair up under the police cap, grabbing his gun, wallet and car keys. She slipped out of the room. She moved the out of order sign she found hanging on the back of the door onto the front of the door and pulled the door shut with the handle locked. Satisfied that would keep the contents of the room from being discovered before she made a getaway, she hurried out of the building from the nearest exit, pleased to find the police car waiting nearby. Nobody paid any attention to her as she sped away, lights flashing, seeing the uniform she wore and assuming everything was as it should be. As soon as she got well out of the city, she got off the highway looking for a stretch of road with little traffic. She soon found what she was looking for and turned on her siren behind a lone car. The driver pulled over, rolling down his window as she approached. "What's the problem, officer?" he asked in Dutch. Unfortunately, Victoria couldn't speak Dutch, so she simply shot him right between the eyes. Not wanting to waste precious time, she shoved him over into the passenger seat and took off, unfazed by the bleeding corpse in the seat beside her. It hardly took any time at all for her to reach the airport in Rotterdam. From there, she patrolled the long-term parking area until she found a woman getting ready to head out on a trip. She hit her over the head with the tire iron Shed pulled from the guy's trunk. When Shed moved his body into it next, she shoved the woman into her own trunk, grabbing only the carry-on bag and the lady's purse. She left the gun in the trunk with the dead body, knowing she couldn't take it with her on the plane, but kept the tire iron in her carry-on bag. She used the back seat of the car to change into suitable female attire obtained from the woman's suitcase. Afraid there might be authorities waiting at the airport in Florence, she decided to fly into Zurich instead and then drive the rest of the way. Meanwhile, Lucas and Sven awoke at roughly the same time. Sven's change had taken slightly longer due to needing to repair the damage of having newly fused limbs. Neither had any memory of encountering Victoria. They stared in horror at the scene in front of them, knowing they'd never risk exposure by killing police officers. The policemen were dead, but it didn't appear to human eyes to have been at the hands of vampires. They were deeply distressed to find themselves human again, feeling weak and vulnerable. "It must have been a very powerful vampire who did this to us," Lucas theorized, "and set us up to take the fall for murdering these men." Sven nodded his head. "We need to go warn Steven and Vladimir. If the Volturi get this vampire on their side, there'll be no stopping them ever again." Lucas agreed, and the two former vampires hurried away, chartering a flight to Romania. Once in Zurich, Victoria lurked in the parking deck until she found a lone individual approaching his car. As he leaned over to put his bag in the trunk, she struck, causing him to fall forward. It made the job of loading him inside much easier. Taking his wallet, she shut him up inside, putting his suitcase and her bag into the back seat. She was exhausted by the time she reached Milan and decided to stay there for the night, unaccustomed to requiring multiple meals and sleep daily to function properly. She finally made it Volterra and approached the receptionist behind the desk in the castle's lobby. "I'm here to see Eero," Vicky informed the woman as she opened her mouth to begin her greeting. "I have urgent business with him." Yana's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Why is a human asking for one of the masters by name, she wondered. "Are you here for a tour?" Vicky scowled and hissed, "No, I'm not here to beat dinner. I have information for Master Eero, you incompetent human." Yana's eyes widened, but she calmly replied, "Have a seat please, and I'll let him know you're here." Yana called upstairs to the throne room, informing Felix that a human had specifically asked for Eero by name and had implied she knew he wasn't human. Raising an eyebrow, Eero commanded Afton, "Bring her to me." Afton nodded and hurried downstairs. He grumpily walked into the lobby holding his breath so he won't inadvertently eat the secretary. He grabbed the female from the waiting area by the arm, yanking her up into a standing position. Angry at the rough treatment, Victoria grabbed his balls and twisted. It didn't hurt him, but it did surprise him enough for him to inhale. Yana saw him start drinking from the woman and figured Eero had told him to come down and dispose of her. Not wanting to watch the lady's demise firsthand, she turned away and began typing on her computer. Suddenly she heard a loud thunk and some whimpering. She carefully sneaked a peek, not sure if she wanted to know what was happening or not. She saw Afton writhing around making small pain-filled noises while the woman laid in a crumpled heap. Jane must be punishing him for draining the woman. Jonna assumed Arrow must not have ordered him to drink from her after all, at least not in front of me. Well trained to ignore such happenings, Jonna continued typing on her computer, pretending nothing was wrong. She nearly jumped out of her skin though when the woman appeared in front of her again. "I'm here to see Arrow," Victoria informed her, unaware she was repeating herself. She had no memory of anything beyond entering the lobby. "I have urgent business with him." "Have a seat," Jonna stuttered nervously, seeing Afton still convulsing. "Masters, there's something wrong with Afton, and the human is still waiting for you," Jonna whispered into the phone. Arrow furrowed his brow. "Santiago, go see what is going on down there." Santiago hurried to do Master Arrow's bidding. He found Afton and was sure he was being attacked by Jane. He inhaled deeply to catch Jane's scent, but instead became ensnared by the spell. Jonna watched as Santiago attacked and heard the snap of Victoria's neck as he forced her head back so he could feed Chess dead. Now Jonna thought eagerly. Unnerved by the strange woman, she turned away and began organizing the files in her cabinet, humming to herself to drown out the noises from the waiting area. She didn't hear Santiago fall because he landed on the Levessiet when he detached from Vicky's neck, and the carpet was thick enough to cushion the fall of a mere human. "I'm here to see Arrow," Vicky declared stridently, slamming her hand down on Jonna's desk to get the receptionist's attention once again. She had no memory of saying those words before. "I have urgent business with him." Jonna shrieked this time. "What the hell are you?" Victoria scowled. "None of your damn business, human." Jonna scurried over to the desk and pulled out a gun. It was designed to temporarily slow a hunting vampire and was filled with large explosive hollow-point rounds. Seeing what Jonna was reaching for, Vicky grabbed the knife out of her bag and threw it, expertly hitting Jonna right in the heart, slicing halfway through the aorta. Shocked, Jonna still managed to squeeze out a single round, aiming right between Vicky's eyes. The bullet exploded inside her skull, blowing her brains and the entire back half of her head off, splattering all over the room, an injury far too grievous for rapid healing to cure. Unfortunately, Jonna made the mistake of pulling out the knife as she fell backwards, causing her to bleed out in mere seconds. By the time Felix and Dimitri made it to the lobby to check on the source of the gunshot, Victoria and Jonna were both dead. Too dead for Arrow to read their memories and too dead for Vicky's blood to call to the arriving guard members. Arrow could find nothing in Afton's or Santiago's memories to explain their distress, so they were carried off to their rooms. He dismissed all the guards from the throne room, saying he wanted privacy. The guards scattered around the castle, though most of them were assigned to cleaning up the giant mess in the lobby. Arrow and Caius discussed what could possibly be wrong, theorizing there was a spy somewhere nearby who had been able to attack the vampires using the human woman as a conduit. Marcus sat there lost in thought, not bothering to contribute to the discussion. Chelsea sat worriedly beside her mate, trying to comfort him. As soon as Afton awoke, Chelsea unwittingly attacked him. A minute later, when he regained consciousness, he had no memory of Victoria. The only thought on his mind was concern for his mate, who was currently yelping and convulsing on the bed beside him. He raced into the throne room with her in his arms, yelling, "Masters, there's something wrong with Chelsea." Arrow and Caius inhaled in shock. While Marcus didn't react, Arrow and Caius both pounced on Afton, knocking Chelsea off to the side. Marcus tilted his head and watched as Arrow and Caius tried to drain Afton, only feeling mildly curious. It wasn't until Arrow and Caius fell away from Afton and began screaming and writhing around that Marcus began feeling flickers of life inside his mental wheels picking up speed as he processed this new development. He heard Afton's heart still beating and watched as the man regained consciousness. Afton saw Chelsea and scurried over to her, cradling her in his arms again. When Santiago ran into the throne room, his heart beating too, Marcus began putting the pieces together. "What the hell is going on in here?" Santiago yelled. "I don't know," Afton admitted, helplessly looking to Marcus for guidance. By this point, Chelsea was far enough along in her transformation that her gift no longer functioned. Marcus was free for the first time in over 2,000 years. He got up, moving at high speed, and decapitated all 5 of them, then calmly returned to his throne, watching the blood and venom pool on the floor and wash down the drain in the center of the room. X. Peter answered his incessantly ringing phone to find a frantic Garrett on the other end of the line. "Pete, there's some really crazy shit going on, I think," Garrett declared. "I saw a human who looked just like our old buddy Raul, only without all the scars from the Southern Wars. He was even wearing the same crest around his neck that Raul always wore." I started following him from a distance out of curiosity. He stepped into an alleyway and boldly declared he was looking for fellow vampires because he used to be one. I was about to come out of hiding and confront him when I saw another vampire jump on him and start drinking. About 30 seconds later, they both fell to the ground. Raul was silent, his heart still beating, while the vampire writhed on the ground, screaming and hollering. I wasn't sure what to do, whether or not this guy was alone or what was happening. I thought it might be a trap then. Raul stood up and walked away as if nothing had happened. "You need to get away from there quickly. Hold your breath until you know you're alone. No humans within smelling distance," Peter warned. "Where are you?" Alice, Garrett informed him while racing away from the city. Shit, it spread really quickly, Peter thought, panicking. "I'm with a major in Oregon," Peter replied, trying to stay calm. "There's a plague sweeping through Raul, and now that other vampire are both infected. It started in Mexico City yesterday, so it's traveling quickly. I know it sucks, but you need to drink from animals and pass the word on to any other vampires you see or know. Former vampires are being changed into something else, a weapon against our kind. They look and sound like regular humans, but one whiff of their scent and you're helpless to resist. You drink their blood, and within 20 minutes you wake up just like them, weak and human-like. It doesn't affect animal drinkers, though, so that's our only hope at the moment to fight against it. Carlisle Cullen is working on a cure, but he hasn't found one yet." "Shit, are you sure that animal crap will work? This better not be one of your pranks," Whitlock Garrett cursed. "Yeah, I'm sure Char and I are drinking it too," Peter admitted. Carlisle located the witch who started it all, and she's dead now, but he was able to learn that the scent of the cursed blood only affects those whose bellies contain human blood, something about the wording of the spell, so until he finds a way to reverse it, animal blood is the only protection we've got. "Crap, guess I'll go suck down a deer," then Garrett mumbled, disgruntled. "The predators taste better if you can find one, but beggars can't afford to be choosers at the moment," Peter offered. "Thanks," Garrett grumbled. "Do they die as easily as humans?" "No, they have rapid healing," Peter warned. "They're kind of like zombies. I know decapitation works." "Okay, I'm on my way," Garrett replied. He decided to go back and take out the two plague carriers he'd seen to help prevent them from spreading it, further careful to hold his breath the entire time. Peter and Char quickly began making calls to all the covens they knew. Once they'd exhausted their phone logs, Peter called Carlisle to update him on the situation. "We're still looking for the cure," Carlisle informed him, worried it's rare, so I doubt we'll be able to make enough to change everyone back, especially with it spreading so quickly. He was careful not to reveal the source of the cure following his friend's warning to keep Nahul's existence a secret. "We've gotten the word out to everyone we know, everyone that's left, that is," Peter responded. He gave Carlisle the list of names he and Char had already reached. "You better call any other contacts you have." Carlisle hung up and looked at the Amazonians grimly. He quickly called the other covens. He knew that Peter didn't. "I can finally see the use of these little phones of yours," Carlisle's Afrina admitted. "I suppose I shall have to pick up one after all. It would be nice to get a warning of impending danger long before it arrived." "What of the witch's concerns regarding the release of other deadly viruses?" Kichiri asked. "Now that so many vampires are being transformed." Carlisle frowned and shook his head. "It's unlikely the change from drinking the blood happens in 20 minutes instead of the 6 days for the original spell. That means any period of contagion when the person is fully human and before the rapid healing kicks in to cure any illness would be less than 2 minutes long. A human would have to be close enough to breathe the same air or to touch the changing individual during those few critical minutes, otherwise the virus will die before it can infect anyone else. It's possible there might be some illnesses passed along, especially if the vampire was severely infected at the time of the initial change and is changed again in front of witnesses. For example, someone might call for the paramedics if they see someone who appears to be having a seizure. The paramedics would be in close contact with the infected individual." The Amazonian women decided to take a quick hunt for animals just to be on the safe side before they continued on with their search for Nahul. While they were gone, Carlisle wrestled briefly with his conscience and decided to call the Volturi and warn them. The phone rang and rang for several minutes. Carlisle was just about to hang up when someone picked up and cautiously answered. "Pronto?" "Marcus?" Carlisle asked in shock. "Carlisle Cullen," Marcus queried. "Yes, I was calling to warn you about a curse that is turning vampires into humanoid creatures. The former vampires appear to be human, but the scent of their blood is irresistible to human drinkers. A single whiff puts the vampire in a trance wherein their only thoughts are of drinking. They don't care about exposure or even their own self-preservation. Then once a vampire drinks from one of these creatures, they are transformed into one of them, a humanoid with contagious blood, in a mere 20 minutes," Carlisle explained. "I see, this would been very good information to have an hour ago," my old friend Marcus replied. "What else do you know?" "Animal drinkers are not affected by the scent, so if you all drink it for the time being, you should be safe enough. I am working with the Amazonian coven to find a cure, but we haven't been successful yet," Carlisle admitted. "It has already spread throughout Central America and parts of North and South America. The witch who started it lived in Colombia, but she's dead." Kichiri of the Amazon coven recognized the ancient dark magic and believes we will be able to locate a cure, but the source of the key ingredient is extremely rare. "Thank you for letting me know," Marcus responded thoughtfully. "Please keep me informed. It has already spread to Europe as well, so we seem to have quite an epidemic on our hands. I shall get the word out about the animal blood. I hereby issue an official decree that until a cure is located, any humanoid shall be immediately and summarily executed." Carlisle gulped, hoping nobody found his family members before he could locate the cure. The Mun received the warning phone call from Carlyle, but treated it with disdain. He thought the vegetarian had finally lost his marbles, as if I would ever consider feeding from foul beasts, he muttered to himself, dismissing the idea out of hand. Benjamin had overheard the conversation and thought it rather odd, had never met Carlyle Cullen, and was surprised to learn it was even possible to feed from animals instead of humans. His sire had certainly never mentioned it as an alternative. As he pondered the significance of this development, he was shocked to hear the phone ring again. Amun hated technology, and the phone was only in place for extreme emergencies. This time it was a member of the Volturi calling. The story given was the same regarding the plague of human-like creatures whose blood sang irresistibly to any vampire with human blood in their bellies. The guard member admitted they had learned from Carlyle Cullen that animal blood seemed to provide some kind of resistance to the siren song of the humanoids, but warned they had no first-hand knowledge of the truth of that claim. They did confess to encountering several of the creatures themselves, but an unnamed member of the Volturi had vanquished them by holding his breath. A royal decree had been given to destroy the creatures and any infected vampires on site to prevent the spread of the plague, with decapitation being given as a suggested method. The Mun decided he would much rather hold his breath than feed from animals. He didn't even bother mentioning the issue to the rest of his coven. If Benjamin hadn't been close enough to overhear the conversation, he wouldn't have been aware of it. Unlike Amun, Benjamin decided he and his mate would take the safer route. He figured they wouldn't be able to hold their breath forever and worried they wouldn't be able to distinguish between these humanoids and regular humans. He and Tia went out hunting in the nearest wilderness. It wasn't a pleasant hunt compared to feeding from humans, and he could easily see why the idea wasn't a popular one. The two of them weren't sure it was worth it, at least until they came home and found Amun and Kibi with looks of misery and human heartbeats, accompanied by 4 other humanoids. "You must help us change us back," Amun pleaded. Kibi and the other 4 males nodded, adding, "Please." Benjamin had heard enough from the phone call to realize biting them would result in him and Tia being transformed as well. Instead, with a heavy heart, he quickly decapitated the 3 of them. Had explained everything to his mate prior to hunting, so she knew why had done it. She wordlessly comforted him over the loss of his sire, secretly glad to be rid of the old fart and his creepy companions. Though she felt sorry for Kibi, she recognized 2 of the men as Dracula 1 and Dracula 2, as she had dubbed them in her head, the first time she had met the ancient duo Stephen and Vladimir. "Well, it doesn't taste great, but the animal diet sure beats the alternative for the time being," Tia declared. Benjamin nodded in agreement as they watched a funeral pyre of the 6 former human drinkers together. Maria gathered a contingent of fellow warlords together to make a trip to Forks. The day before they had all been mortal enemies. Now they banded together for protection against a force they didn't understand. All of them were now weak and vulnerable, human, like the cattle they had fought over for centuries. They didn't know what had happened to cause them to be reduced to such a pathetic condition, but they were certain the Volturi were somehow involved. Most figured it was a punishment for continuing the wars after the last time the Volturi had swept through and decimated their armies for exposing themselves to their feeding stock. Maria had rallied them with the hope that Diablo could save them. They believed he was the only vampire strong enough to stand against such a powerful gift as the one that had rendered them helpless. They hoped he would restore their vampire status and fight with them against the enemy. Unfortunately for them, Alice saw them coming. She recognized them from previous visions, especially the woman leading them. The wolves were not happy to learn what kind of people were on their way to Forks. Maria and the other warlords knocked on the door at the Cullens' house, but received no answer. Instead, an entire pack of horse-sized wolves appeared in a semicircle from out of the woods, trapping them in front of the house. The humanoid group tried valiantly to fight back, but there was nothing they could do against their supernatural opponents. The wolves had no qualms whatsoever in ripping the former vampires to pieces, knowing they were collectively responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of humans over the past 2 centuries. They had learned from Victoria's actions that being in human-like bodies wouldn't stop sadistic murdering bastards from killing humans to get what they wanted. The tribe finally understood the adage evil is as evil does. In fact, as proof they could smell blood and decay coming from the 2 vehicles' trunk. Sam called Charlie about what they suspected, and he suggested they move the cars off the Cullens' property to a random spot on the side of the highway so he could discover them without causing problems for the family or the tribe. He felt the families of the victims contained in the trunks deserved the closure of knowing what happened to them, even if they would never know that the murderers received justice. It definitely helps to have a police chief in the know for these supernatural situations, Seth thought with relief. Bella woke up a short 48 hours after the start of her transformation. Jasper had pumped her so full of venom, in fear of her not surviving, that had used twice as much as usual. The extra venom helped speed along the change. Bella's broken neck meant she hadn't felt the pain of her body burning until after the first day when the damage to her spinal cord was repaired. Usually the pain caused people's Muscles to lock up tight, clamping down on blood vessels and restricting blood flow. The lack of tension in her muscles allowed the venom to rush through her body unhindered, resulting in a much faster transformation than usual. Finally, by the time she did feel the pain all over, Jasper was wrapped around her, absorbing as much of her pain as he could. Since she knew what was happening to her, she embraced the change, instead of fighting against the fiery agony. This was the final aspect that allowed the process to progress at a much faster rate than usual. She didn't open her eyes right away when her heart stopped. She knew she'd be overwhelmed and disoriented from her conversations with Jasper on the subject, thus she paused, holding her breath, and took a few moments to catalog the sounds she was hearing and the things she was feeling. She didn't move, and Jasper remained still as a statue as well. His body was wrapped around hers, just as it had been for many hours, and he didn't want to startle her by trying to extricate himself. Peter and Char had both frozen in place downstairs, waiting to see what would happen. Now that Jasper's newborn mate was awake, they knew as well as he did the importance of not startling or frightening her, knowing she would attack or flee once her survival instincts were activated. Bella remained quiet and still for several minutes, allowing her mind to adjust to its new capabilities, able to focus on multiple systems of thought at the same time. She loved the sensation of her mate's body pressed against hers, feeling safe and secure in his protective embrace. Jasper began getting worried though, as time continued to pass without any kind of movement or response from Bella. Did she die for real, he fretted. Just as he was about to move to check on her, he heard and felt her inhale deeply. She tensed slightly, temporarily overwhelmed by the rush of new input it afforded her. She recognized Jasper's molasses and wood smoke scent, as well as her own flowery one. She instantly knew there were two other vampires nearby, distinguishing the spiced peaches aroma of the female and the cedar and leather of the male. She didn't recognize the scents at all from her time as a human, but before she could panic, the peaceful way her mate was lying there beside her registered, and she deduced it must be Peter and Charlotte, the friends Jasper had been picking up from the airport when she was attacked. She forced herself to relax, knowing her mate would protect her from any danger. Somehow he had come through before, even though he was far away when she needed him most, which only proved to her that she could trust him to always be there for her. She remembered being thrown into a tree and hearing an ominous snap before losing consciousness. Her Jasper had saved her and changed her so they could be together forever, something Edward would have never considered. He didn't try to force her to continue living human in abject misery, with heavy bruises and broken bones like Edward had done after her last vampire attack. Jasper had clearly realized that a few days of intense pain now to wake up healthier and stronger than ever was a far superior choice compared to enduring endless weeks of pain and helplessness while merely postponing the days of burning she intended for herself at some point anyway. She was glad to have those days over and behind her once and for all. She would never be so vulnerable ever again. Once she was comfortable with everything she could hear, feel and smell, she breathed in through her mouth, tasting the air. This added a whole new dimension to the scents she'd already catalogued, not only of the vampires, but everything else in the room: fabric, wood, plastic, metal, stone, etc. Jasper had caught on to what she was doing, how she was exploring each scent one at a time, and marveled at her foresight in approaching things this way. Finally, once she felt in control again, she opened her eyes, staring only at what was right in front of her for a while. Before moving her eyes around, she realized she'd known the approximate location of things around the room simply by the way they smelled. The sense of sight took more time for adjustment than any of the others, which is why she'd saved it for last. The information overload was twice all the other senses combined. She still had yet to move her body even a millimeter from the position it had been in when her heart stopped. Now she cautiously moved her thumb, stroking across Jasper's skin. She felt the roughness of the bite marks she knew were there and tilted her head just enough so she could watch herself do it. The new position of her head gave her a much better view of her mate, and she marveled at the multiple shades of colors in his honey blonde hair. She tilted her head further to get a look at his face, where it was lying on her chest, enjoying the peaceful, serene expression he was sporting with his eyes closed, as if he were sleeping. The scars she could see clearly now were not frightening or disgusting to her. Instead, she was filled with pride, knowing how strong and powerful he was to have survived so many vicious attacks while his opponents no longer existed. She reached up to run her fingers through his hair, surprised when it happened instantly. She felt the silky strands glide against her skin in a sensual way, gently scratching her fingernails against his scalp. Careful not to hurt him, she felt and heard him inhale sharply and pushed her love and awe toward him. She heard a deep rumbling purr in his chest and felt the vibrations reverberate throughout her body, causing intensely pleasurable sensations. Her body flooded with arousal, and she was overcome with a deep primal urge to claim and be claimed by her mate, tugging on his hair. She pulled his head up so she could kiss him. He opened his eyes to look at her, and she fell into the fathomless pools of inky blackness. Thoughts of feeding were the furthest things from her mind. As a stronger hunger overcame her, she subconsciously muled to communicate her need and was instantly rewarded with Jasper's lips moving against her own. She reveled in the taste of him as she rubbed her tongue against his. She felt his hand cupping her between her legs and moved against it, seeking friction. He cooperated beautifully, pressing against her just right as her hips rocked against him frantically. She ripped all his clothes off of him, running her hands over him, exploring his skin. He reciprocated, removing her clothes in haste, shredding the fabric without regard for whatever she'd been wearing. As soon as his fingers brushed against her moist lower lips without any barrier between them, a single thought shot across Bella's mind, causing her to inadvertently push him away, sending him flying across the room. As he stared at her in shock, she yelled, "Shit, I'm still a fucking virgin." Marcus calmly informed the remaining Volturi of what happened to the others. He explained that drinking animal blood was the only known deterrent to the plague, and that any who become infected should be immediately decapitated, which would lead to permanent death. He then charged them all with maintaining order and stopping the spread of the curse. Dismissing them to hunt animals in the nature reserve forests of Berignan, Monterifoli, Casilli and Castelvecchio, he went to his quarters and tore off his heavy black robe. "I always hated that thing," he thought, tossing it aside. Changing into comfortable clothes, he went out into the forest, chasing down prey for the first time in millennium. It was oddly invigorating, having a reason to use his speed and hunting skills. The blood was bland, but filling. Unfortunately, large predators were few and far between in the area, and small predators like foxes and weasels weren't really worth the effort of procuring them. "I can finally join my didim, but I owe it to my people to resolve this issue first. As soon as it's run its course, I'll turn over governance of our world to Carlisle Cullen and get some peace at long last," he soothed himself. If he doesn't find a cure, the only vampires who remain will be those willing to drink animal blood. Those who are too stubborn to change their diet, we're better off without them. Anyway. Jane spat out her first mouthful of deer blood and angrily tossed the dying animal away from her. "That's disgusting," she growled. "I refuse to stoop to such levels." She went in search of her brother, had managed to drain several wild sheep, though he didn't look happy about it. She scowled at him. "How can you drink that stuff? It's horrible." He shrugged. "It beats becoming human and having my head removed." Jane rolled her eyes. "That'll never happen to me," she declared. "I'd stop any enemy with my gift before he or she could get to me." Alec furrowed his brow. "Are you sure that would work?" She nodded emphatically, determined to prove it. Once free of Chelsea's power, Corin finally realized she'd essentially been kept prisoner in Volterra for centuries, forced to enslave others with her gift for Arrow's benefit, making them physically addicted to the feeling of contentment she could produce. As soon as she finished feeding from the 2 wild boar shed found, she decided to make a run for it. She had no desire to return to the castle, wanting to see the world for the first time since Arrow found her roughly 1500 years ago. Because of the cursed blood, Arrow and Caius drank. Their bonds were broken with their mates, enabling the wives to endure the death of the 2 kings without being dragged down by it, the way mates normally were. Unfortunately for them, they were too addicted to Corin's gift from the constant exposure to it to function without her, so they followed her trail. Marcus understood what had happened and let them go without protest. Jane and Alec were also addicted to Corin's gift, but not to the same extent as the wives. Arrow had ordered Corin to use her abilities on them only periodically to keep them complacent, so they wouldn't try to fight him for power. Thus the twins didn't start feeling the effects of her absence until 2 days later. I stared chagrined at my poor shocked mate. Wad landed up against the wall, catching himself in time to prevent causing any damage. I hadn't meant to push him so hard, only intending to get his attention. I was used to hanging around supernatural creatures as a human instead of as an equal. When my hardest shoves felt featherlight to them, this new strength of mine was going to be a bit of an adjustment. I heard Peter and Charlotte make a run for it out of the house and was glad they weren't going to be there to witness any more of my humiliation. Jasper was quickly back across the room and in my arms, soothing my distress. I felt like crying. "Now it's going to hurt every time you fuck me for the rest of eternity." "Hush sweetie, of course it won't. Why would you think that he could?" "Because y'all have to break my super strong vampire hymen, which will hurt like hell, then it'll regrow as soon as you're done," I wailed. I saw my mate's lips twitching out of the corner of my eye as he tried to hide his amusement. "Little fucker, how would he like to get circumcised every time he wants to have sex? I bet that skin would grow back too. Let's see how funny he thinks it is." Then I mentally huffed. "Darling, I can take care of your hymen for you right now, and y'all never have to worry about it again," he promised, trying to get me to lie down. "How the hell are you going to do that?" I demanded. He smirked. "It's right here at the entrance. I'll be able to see it easily if y'all just lay back and spread your legs for me. I can remove it with my fingernails and seal the affected area with my venom so it can't repair itself." I shook my head in denial. "No, that doesn't make sense. You can't just see it. It's like halfway inside the canal." I've read enough steamy romance novels to remember the descriptions. The guy penetrates her several inches before encountering the resistance of her barrier. Jasper chuckled. Actually the hymen stretches like a balloon, so the guy is able to penetrate several inches pushing against it before it finally becomes rigid and snaps, which is when he feels the resistance, and it really is right at the front at the opening, where even a human can easily see it. You should Google it if you don't believe me. I think I will, I remarked petulantly, crossing my arms over my chest. Or you could just trust me, and I promise it'll make you feel really good, he purred, running his hands up my thighs, sending tingles shooting upward to my pussy. Well, if you promise, I easily conceded, leaning back on the pillow and letting my legs fall apart naturally as I felt my lust start building again. He dove in with his tongue in my most sensitive of places, and I hissed in pleasure, feeling his warm breath fan out over my wetness. He quickly located the nubbin of sensation, the one I had only recently located myself with a little help from the internet, to help relieve some of the sexual tension I felt whenever I woke up in the night from dreams of Jasper. Jasper's ministration sent shock waves through me, so much more powerful than my own clumsy fingers had produced in my few nightly exploratory sessions. I fisted my hands in his curls, tugging him closer, rocking my hips against him. Jasper, so good, I purred, my chest rumbling the way his had done earlier. I felt and heard him begin purring once again, the vibration shooting through me, resonating up into my chest, where my heart no longer beat. His hand slid up my body to my breasts, playing with them expertly, making me gasp as it felt like lightning bolts of pleasure coursed through my body. I felt the wetness pooling now as he brought one hand back down and began swirling his finger around my opening. With just a light pressure I bucked against him, starting to pant and writhe in the bed as the tension built up in my muscles. I felt myself heating up and was glad I could no longer sweat. His tongue prodded against the tiny bundle of nerves right where I needed it. Finally I couldn't take it anymore and felt myself convulsing as waves of pleasure washed over me. I felt like I was floating, lost in a euphoric haze, barely feeling a pinch as he tore away my hymen with his fingers, cutting it away in a semicircle with surgical precision. I became aware of him flooding my entrance with his venom. The burning sensation brought me back down to earth, replacing my lust with discomfort. It was somewhat painful, but easily manageable, like I remembered scraped knees feeling back when I was human. With my balance issues, that was a sensation I'd become quite used to enduring. Knowing I was no longer in an amorous mood, Jasper pulled back and smiled, suggesting, how about I take you hunting and get your other hunger taken care of now? I looked down and saw his member standing straight up, begging for attention. Shouldn't I take care of you first? I asked. I'd never gotten a guy off before, but I'd done some research online on what to do, so I'd be ready when the time came. He shook his head and smirked, moving over to the dresser to grab some clothes for both of us. I'm not letting those razor-sharp teeth of yours anywhere near my family jewels until you've been well fed, darling, he drawled. You need the blood in your system to help you stay calm when your instincts flare. He suddenly shuddered, grimacing in horror at a memory. I've seen what happens when a thirsty newborn gets startled while pleasuring someone down there. It isn't a pretty sight. Thank God I wasn't the one who had to learn that lesson the hard way. The Amazonian Coven finally located Nahul in the wilds of Brazil. He cautiously agreed to talk to Carlyle, since the Amazons vouched for him. Nahul and Hulin were surprised to learn that vampires could exist solely on animal blood, wondering why they'd never thought of doing that themselves, given their respect for human life. They listened patiently to Carlyle's story, becoming alarmed upon learning more about the curse. They refused to go anywhere near the humanoids, not wanting to become infected themselves. Nahul reluctantly allowed Carlyle to take samples of his blood and venom. They moved back into Colombia as a group, all proactively hunting animals, but stayed well away from Carlos's family just to be safe. Carlyle obtained the medical equipment he needed to study the samples and the effects they had on cursed blood. Fascinating, he crowed. The witch said the curse first returns the vampire cells back to their natural human state. However, Nahul was born this way, not changed, so this is his natural state, thus the curse is helpless against it. Nahul refused to bite the humanoids, still concerned about the possibility of becoming contaminated himself. They worked out a compromise, and Carlyle collected a large enough quantity of venom to inject via syringe. When he got back to his family, he didn't tell them anything about Nahul making up a story regarding the contents of the cure. He felt bad about lying to them, but he had to honor his agreement to remain silent on the existence of hybrids if he wanted their continued cooperation. Rose and Emmett could tell Carlyle wasn't confident the cure would work and was hiding something about where and how had gotten it, thus they were reluctant to trust either him or it, given the mistake they made in trusting Edward about the curse in the first place. Carlyle was terrified for his mate to be the first to try it, though worried it would make the situation worse, and Esm wasn't overly eager either. They all felt Edward should be the initial guinea pig, but knew the wolves would never allow it, especially considering Edward was vehemently against changing back into a vampire. Unfortunately, Carlyle realized he'd screwed up rather badly in listening to Edward and not testing him or questioning him further the first time around, so he couldn't blame the others for not trusting him now. After a significant amount of inner turmoil, he decided he had to risk his own mate to prove the cure successful before he could expect anyone else to accept it. He waited until Esme had fallen asleep, then injected her with Nahul's venom. He knelt by her side and desperately began to pray, hoping for the best. It didn't take long for her to begin moaning and shuddering, tossing her head back and forth as if having a nightmare. 36 long torturous hours later she finally lay still. Carlyle furrowed his brow, realizing he could still hear her heart beating. Her body was still warm, too feverish, and he could still smell blood in her system, though he could smell venom too. Her eyes popped open, still hazel, and she stared at him in consternation. Carlyle, I felt like I was burning all over again. What did you do to me? She demanded. She sat up, her movements quick, faster than a human's. Carlyle frowned sadly. I'm sorry my dear, I tried to cure you, but I don't think it worked. You're still not a vampire. She growled angrily and pushed him away, hopping up and racing to look at herself in the bathroom mirror. She noticed the stress lines had faded from her face, and her baby paunch had disappeared, melting away like it had the first time she changed. Since her baby had only been a few days old when he died, and she attempted suicide, she hadn't had time for her uterus to contract back to normal size or to lose the extra weight she'd put on for her pregnancy, so it had come back when she became a humanoid. The rapid healing had helped with her uterus, and she'd worked to get back in shape in the 6 weeks or so since she awoke from the witch's curse, but her lower abdomen had still puffed out in ways it hadn't as a vampire. Now her body was back in the same gorgeous condition it had been in for the 8 years she'd lived as Carlyle's wife. As she thought about the changes she noticed she felt thirsty. Her throat was scratchy, like she was coming down with a cold. She ran the water, filling a small cup and drinking it, but it didn't soothe her the way she'd expected. If anything, her slightly sore throat felt a little worse. It reminded her a little bit of how she used to feel when she was satiated as a vampire. Her throat had always kept a slight burn no matter how much animal blood she drank. While reminiscing about hunting, she was startled to notice her eyes darkening, similar to the way they had when she'd been a vampire. Carlyle, she called nervously, peering into the mirror and rubbing her throat with her hand. He quickly zipped into the bathroom to join her, his gaze concerned and repentant. I think maybe the cure did work to some extent, she admitted. I'm feeling thirsty, and my body has changed. I know I'm warm and still have a heartbeat, but I'm craving blood. It's almost like I'm half human, half vampire. Carlyle's eyes widened in shock. Yulin's existence had proven that Nahul's venom had the ability to change a normal human into a full vampire, and his tests in the lab had confirmed that the hybrid's venom behaved exactly the same way toward human cells as Carlyle's venom did. The difference had observed had been in the way the venom reacted with the humanoid blood. Carlyle's venom had been overcome by the cursed blood, turning the venom into humanoid cells. Nahul's venom, on the other hand, had invaded the infected cells in the same way as it invaded normal human cells, changing it. Carlyle had thus assumed Nahul's venom would work on the humanoids the same way it would on a normal human. He hadn't tested the changed humanoid blood on a DNA level, though, which he now realized was a significant oversight on his part. He cursed himself for not testing everything fully before using it on his mate. She had been changed by the venom, but how, into what? The curse tries to counteract the venom, returning it to its natural human state, but as I thought before, Nahul's natural state is a hybrid. Does that mean the curse stops his venom from making a full vampire, leaving them in the same hybrid state as his natural DNA, he postulated. He thought about everything he'd learned about the natural hybrids. They had most of the strength and speed of a full vampire, enough to defend themselves, but they also had other advantages that helped them blend in better with humans. They didn't sparkle in the sun, were warm, had a heartbeat, had a normal human eye color, could sleep, could eat and enjoy human food, and didn't feel the thirst as strongly as full vampires did. They also enjoyed rapid healing and immortality like the shifters. It would be wonderful if the cure turns them into hybrids instead, Carlyle decided. The only downside is probably not being able to reattach removed body parts. They are more vulnerable, easier to kill than full vampires. Still, if this is the result of the cure, it would enable Nahul and his sisters to interact with other vampires without fear of exposure. They would simply pretend to be cured vampires, not telling anyone they were actually born that way. He hurriedly obtained samples from Esme and took off for the lab to find out for certain what she'd become. On the way, he called Nahul and asked him to get samples from his sisters, if possible, for comparison. Nahul was resistant at first, but once Carlyle told him what he thought the cure had done and how it could mean freedom for Nahul and his siblings to interact with others without fear, he agreed to undertake the journey. Nahul had just gathered the blood samples from his sisters and stored them in a small cooler when Johim came stumbling in the front door, looking like something the cat had dragged in backwards through a swamp. Nahul smirked at the panic and distress on his father's face, realizing Johim had become a victim of the curse. His eyes flew to his aunt with concern and was relieved to see she wasn't affected by the scent of Johim's blood. Thank goodness we took Carlyle's advice and have been feeding from animals, he thought. He could see the same relief in Hewlin's eyes as he exchanged a glance with her. He was also pleased to note that his sisters were immune to the call of the cursed blood, even though they still drank from humans. He remembered the words the witch had used in the curse, those whose hearts no longer beat and who carry the blood of humans in their bellies, and realized hybrids were naturally immune because of their beating hearts. Son, Joachim cried, something terrible has happened to me, you've got to change me back. Nahul shook his head, replying, this is the plague that's sweeping all through the world, we heard about it, but you're the first victim I've seen in person. They're working on a cure, but so far the only thing they've found to help turns the person into a half vampire like us, instead of a full vampire like you used to be. But Joachim whined, what good is that? It's all well and good for you guys, at least you're better than those pesky humans, but in better than that I don't want to be a pathetic weakling like you, I want to be strong and powerful like I was meant to be. The girls all flinched and whimpered at his hurtful words. Dad? Jennifer asked. Joachim grimaced, not even bothering to look in her direction as he waved his hand dismissively. Don't call me that, you're just a science experiment I performed to ease my eternal boredom. Now you're useless to me, I should go put my expertise to good use helping them with a cure. As much as he hated his father, Nahul couldn't bring himself to behead the man himself. With a smile he suggested, why don't you come with me, I know where the team is that's working on the cure. Joachim grinned widely, that's my boy, glad to know you're not as useless as the rest of them. He carried Joachim on his back as they ran back to where the Amazonian coven was stationed near the laboratory. As soon as he set Joachim down, the former vampire began belittling the ladies' appearance and insulting their intelligence while promoting his own scientific knowledge and demanding to be made part of the team searching for the cure. The three females exchanged a glance and moved as one to rip Joachim apart as per the Volturi decree. Hewlin grinned with satisfaction while Nahul was stoic. Thank you, I know he was just a sperm donor, but I cold conscience killing him myself, if only because I knew how much it would hurt my sisters. I didn't want them to blame me for his death, which they would have if I or Hewlin had done it. This way I can say I brought him to the ruling council, who chose to execute him according to their laws. My sisters are going to need my and Hewlin's guidance and support to know how to live without him. They've been kept hidden on his property forever and have no idea how to interact with the real world. Carlyle stared at the DNA results in pleased amazement. A sudden thought occurred to him. Hey Nahul, do your sisters have a menstrual cycle? Nahul flushed red and shrugged. How on earth should I know, he snapped, embarrassed. Well, would you mind giving me a sample of your ejaculate? Carlyle asked, unfazed. Excuse me, Nahul squeaked, eyes wide. I'd like to examine it under a microscope and do a DNA sampling to see if you have the ability to procreate, Carlyle explained. Seeing Nahul's mutinous expression, he hastily added, I promise to destroy any leftover material. You're welcome to watch the entire procedure. Why do you want to know? Nahul inquired suspiciously. I thought it would be better to know than not know and risk the consequences of being surprised later. I only recently discovered that vampires even have sperm, and before meeting you I'd have thought a hybrid was a physical impossibility, Carlyle calmly replied. Additionally, once vampires become humanoid, they are barren. The female ovaries contain no eggs, and the male ejaculate has no sperm. I was wondering whether or not that is the same for the hybrids. Fine, Nahul huffed, going to the bathroom to obtain a sample. Having overheard the conversation, Hewlin approached. What difference does it make? She demanded, eyes narrowed. Understanding that her resentment stemmed from the callous treatment of her sister, Carlyle didn't take offense. My wife and my daughter would dearly love to have children, it's why they wanted to be human. They accepted the curse willingly because they thought it would make them fully human and capable of getting pregnant. My wife's son died a few days after his birth, leading her to attempt suicide by jumping off a cliff. I found her in the morgue and changed her. The humans who found her thought she was already dead. I found and changed my daughter when she was brutally beaten, gang-raped and left in an alley to die a week before her wedding. All she wanted was a house full of children and to grow old with her husband surrounded by their progeny. Both women have lived all these decades filled with the ache of what they lost. He looked into Hewlin's eyes, seeing the pain and compassion there, guessing she was thinking of her sister again. They were devastated when they found out the change they'd sought was a lie and had rendered them barren. If there's any hope they might be able to become pregnant after being transformed into hybrids, it would mean the world to them. Hewlin closed her eyes and nodded, looking away. She admitted Nahul's sisters are on an annual cycle rather than a monthly one, only ovulating once a year. None of them have ever gotten pregnant, though despite Joachim's attempts to make it happen. Hess tried breeding them with humans and vampires, to no avail. He even collected samples from Nahul and inserted them at the right time, but nothing happened. He Also tried mixing Nahul's sperm with a human egg intending to do in vitro fertilization, but the human eggs invariably died upon being invaded by Nahul's sperm. Joham also found that in vitro didn't work for hybrid embryos, the eggs he fertilized with his own vampire sperm, the human girls' bodies, always rejected the fertilized eggs, not allowing them to implant. The only way he was able to reproduce was to actually have sex with the human girls, but that wasn't always effective. Carlyle grimaced, realizing why the two of them were so suspicious of his motives. Joham had been a heartless bastard. Nahul turned over the sample head produced and watched carefully as Carlyle examined it. "Your sperm count is very low," Carlyle commented aloud. "In a human this level would be considered infertile." Nahul nodded. "I know." Carlyle sighed and prepared a small bit of it for DNA sampling, trying to make sure he got as many of the sperm as possible. "I think procreation is highly unlikely," Carlyle admitted. Nahul nodded again. "Joham even went so far as to extract eggs from my sisters and try to fertilize them with my sperm in the laboratory setting, but my sperm didn't even attempt to enter their eggs. The sperm just ignored the hybrid eggs, whereas they did attack human eggs, only to kill them also. Joham found that vampire sperm did attack the hybrid eggs, but it destroyed them the same way my sperm did. But the human ones and human sperm attempted to enter the hybrid eggs, but could never break through the protective barrier around it, so basically human-vampire couples can reproduce, but vampire-hybrid or human-hybrid couples definitely can't, and maybe not hybrid-hybrid couples either." Carlyle frowned, his shoulders sagging. "I suppose it just wasn't meant to be." Nahul bit his lip, then hesitantly offered, "I always wondered if it might be different between hybrid mates, though my sperm ignored my sister's eggs, which quite honestly relieved me greatly, but it seems strange to have those reproductive materials at all. If they're completely useless, I wondered if I ever met another hybrid, one who wasn't related to me, if my sperm would be attracted to her egg instead of ignoring it. If I met my mate, would she and I be compatible in a way my sisters and I were not?" Carlyle's eyebrows raised and he tilted his head as the thought about Nahul's idea. "I suppose it's possible," he conceded. "It's not like you've ever been able to test your theory before, since you and your sisters have been the only hybrids up until now." Nahul smiled briefly and shrugged one shoulder in acknowledgement. "Is it conclusive then? Is your SM truly a hybrid now?" Carlyle smiled and nodded yes. "Her DNA profile matches that of you and your sisters well enough to say with certainty that she is. Time will tell for sure if she has the same properties the rest of you guys do. I'm going to test as many of them as I can today. The reaction to the sun, ability to eat human food, level of bloodlust and ability to sleep. If all of that checks out adequately, then I hope to change my son and daughter." I was returning from my first hunt feeling satisfied and proud of myself, flashing gracefully through the trees hand in hand with my mate. I had taken down 2 elk and a bobcat without much damage to my clothes and spilling very little of the blood. Jasper had praised me on my natural aptitude. Of course I was dirty and had leaves in my hair now, but I felt carefree and uninhibited. I was eager to get back to the house and into the shower with my Jasper, where hopefully I would be able to give him some of the same kind of pleasure had given me earlier. My instincts brought me to an abrupt halt just inside the tree line as my senses detected 2 vampires waiting near the house. "Is that Peter and Char?" I whispered, looking to Jasper for confirmation. While I was comfortable with my mate, I felt wary toward anyone else, even if they were friends. He smiled comfortingly at me and nodded, wrapping an arm around me to help me feel more secure. I inhaled deeply to ingrain their scents in my memory and got a whiff of something utterly foul. "What's that stench?" I hissed. Jasper sniffed the air, then grimaced. Before he had a chance to reply, I heard the sound of someone crashing through the underbrush of the forest on the opposite side of the house at a considerable pace. I tensed, preparing for a threat, my brain recognizing the unmistakable speed of another vampire beside me. Jasper was alert and crouched, ready to defend me if necessary. A scruffy shirtless warrior broke through the tree line across the way and raced toward the house, a bundle of fabric balled up in one fist and a black leather backpack dangling from the other. His face was a mask of rage as he made a beeline for Jasper's friends who were standing on the front porch. Peter patted Char's arm before hopping down the steps and moving forward into the yard to confront his approaching attacker. Peter had his hands up in a placating gesture, and my memory conjured up Jasper's explanation of Peter's gift and playful, provoking nature, realizing from the amusement Jasper was now projecting that Peter was in no real danger and likely deserved whatever was about to happen. Allowed me to relax and enjoy the entertainment from the safety of my position within the forest. "That's our friend Garrett," Peter must called him, Jasper confided in my ear. I shifted to lean my back against his chest, melting into him as he wrapped his arms around me. He rested his chin on top of my head as we watched the scene unfold together. "You little bastard," Garrett roared, tossing the backpack aside and pouncing on Peter. He knocked Peter to the ground and began vigorously rubbing the bundle of fabric in Peter's face. "You pretended to be Carlyle and told me skunk tasted the most like human blood. Now you were going to share in the results of that little hellish hunt." Peter was laughing hysterically while attempting to hold his breath and desperately trying to get the skunk-scented shirt away from him. Barrett was smart to retaliate in such a way, I thought with a smirk, because it would do no real damage to Peter. His gift is useless to protect him against this kind of assault. Peter began struggling in earnest as soon as Garrett took advantage of Peter's laughing open mouth to shove parts of the shirt into it, as if trying to gag him. Peter knocked Garrett's arms away, bucking the other vampire off of him while hacking and spitting, trying to get the taste of skunk spray off his tongue. "Man, that's foul," Peter hollered, wrestling with Garrett for control. "You've got nobody but yourself to blame for it either," Garrett hotly retorted. "If you'd used anybody's voice but Carlisle's, I never would believed you." Peter smirked. "I love technology, so much easier to fool people long distance." "Well, I hate these bloody cell phones," Garrett complained. "You'd better count your lucky stars, there really is a plague, or you'd be in a lot worse trouble right now." "Whatever you say, buddy," Peter chuckled unrepentantly. Jane was starting to experience withdrawals from Corin's gift and was getting even more irritable than usual without Chelsea around to bond her to Marcus. Her only loyalty was to her twin, and everyone else was getting a taste of her wrath. Frowning, Marcus addressed her. "Jane, you need to go hunt. If you can't control your temper, you're of no use to us. You're making it harder for us to accomplish the things we need to do to protect our kind. Maybe the blood will help settle you, if not, perhaps you need to track down Corin and stay with her instead." Growling, Jane hit him with her gift. Worried, Alec wrapped his arms around her and began tugging her out of the room, fearing for her life. "Enough," Marcus yelled as soon as he regained control of his faculties. "If you ever turn your gift on me again, I'll have you executed for treason. Get out of here and don't come back until you're ready to behave yourself." Seeing the murderous gleam in the eyes of all the others, Jane knew they would gladly carry out the order to execute her. Alec knew it as well. Even though he would do his best to defend her, his gift was slow, and Jane's only worked on one at a time. The others had all trained with the twins for centuries and had developed ways to work around their gifts if the rest of the guards stood against them. The twins would eventually both fall. Alec picked Jane up and ran out of the castle with her one safely outside. She hit him on the shoulder, complaining, "Let me down, I can run on my own." He set her down on her feet, taking her hand and running alongside her toward Florence, allowing her to take the lead while he pulled out his cell phone and called Dimitri. "Jane and I are both feeling the loss of Corin's gift," he admitted, his voice heavy with resentment. "As much as I hate to admit it, we're addicted to it like a human crackhead. I doubt either of us will be able to regain our equilibrium without getting a shot of Corin's contentment to tide us over. It just shows how much Arrow manipulated us all without our knowledge." "Yeah, with Chelsea gone we can all feel and see the difference," Dimitri agreed. "As soon as this plague thing is under control, I'm out of here. It's time for me to be my own man again and see what I've been missing out on all these years." "Will you please tell me where Corin is and which way she's heading?" Alec pleaded. "Until we get her fix, Jane and I are both going to be on edge, and nobody wants to be around either of us when we're on a short fuse." As they talked, Jane moved in the direction of the airport. She had done several fishing runs with Heidi in the past, so she knew the way. She was used to feeding from tourists and didn't even consider the dangers of doing so now. With single-minded determination, she approached the main building, watching the humans as they headed toward their cars loaded down with luggage. A group of three caught her eye because they carried only one small bag apiece. Moving closer, she approached them from behind, inhaling deeply before Alec could stop her. She let go of his hand and raced at top speed to attack. Alec's eyes widened in alarm as she risked exposure, pouncing on the man out in the open in broad daylight. As he moved to hide her indiscretion from human eyes, he was surprised to see the humans shifting to shield her as well. One glimpse of their faces was enough to explain the reason why they weren't humans. The three former vampires used to make up one of the Asian covens. The humanoids recognized the Volturi and thought they were being saved. Alec quickly pushed Jane and the one she was guzzling into a nearby taxi so the real humans wouldn't be witness to what was occurring, while the other two humanoids jumped inside as well. "Drive," Alec ordered the cab driver, giving him directions to a nearby garage where the Volturi tour buses were kept in storage. He tried to pull Jane off of her meal, but she was unresponsive at last. He simply forced her jaws apart with enough force to tear the tendons. Holding it shut, he used his gift to keep her from crying out in pain. The driver was terrified, having seen Alec's orangered eyes in the rearview mirror, and drove like a bat out of hell, hoping the presence of the other humans would save him from the demon in the back seat. Not wanting to worry about disposing of the cab and its driver, Alec decided to let the man go. He took the time to dazzle the man into forgetting where he'd been and who had taken there. He paid the man generously as he rewrote the guy's memory into one of a happy couple dropped off at an expensive hotel. Alec carried an unconscious Jane into the warehouse, followed by the three former vampires clamoring with questions. "I will answer you all in a moment," Alec growled as he punched in the key code to obtain entry into the building. He carefully laid his sister on the floor, then turned on the group who were unintentionally responsible for her current predicament. Before their human senses even knew what happened, had decapitated all three of them. He searched their bodies for anything of use, such as money or jewelry, before tossing their remains into the incinerator, built specifically for that purpose. Sometimes the guards who were running the tour operation would need to feed before being able to stand being in such close proximity to a busload of prey. He checked their bags for valuables as well, putting everything he found into one of the bags and tossing the other two into the flames, with their owners sighing to himself. He wished Jane had just sucked it up and drank the animal blood like everyone else did. Hearing her heart start beating again, he knew he couldn't take her back to Volterra or she would be killed on sight. As much as he needed the fix from Corin, he couldn't take her there either. Nobody is expecting to see us for a while, he consoled himself. My only hope of saving her is to hide her until Carlisle finds the cure. With that in mind, he took off, running a bag on his back and his sister in his arms, trying to find a place where he could adequately conceal, care for and protect her. The curse has been used in the past here in South America, though the effects were not as widespread. It is a dark magic handed down through the generations. Kachiri knew the cure and helped the others she came across. I have met at least one other who became a hybrid like Esmes now many years ago. He knows of 3 others who became hybrids over the years as well. They've been in hiding, unsure of how they would be treated by other vampires. My new friend Nahul has been this way for over 150 years. Some of his sisters, the other hybrids, have been around even longer. That's how we can know what to expect. Carlisle explained the cover story had come up with to his family. Holding Esm's hand, had told them all the ways hybrids were different from full vampires, as well as their similarities, not wanting them to worry about what Esm had become. Why were you so worried about giving it to Esm then if you knew what to expect? Rose accused suspiciously. Why didn't you explain all this beforehand? Well, until we actually tried it, there was no way of knowing for sure that this particular witch had changed something within the wording in the curse. Carlisle prevaricated. Shed indicated in her letter that Shed considered altering the language to make it more all-encompassing, so I couldn't know for certain until we tried the cure and then did all the lab work to confirm it. I didn't want to indicate I knew more than I actually did. So you risk my life with an untested cure? Esme asked, angrily pulling away from her husband. He winced and apologized. Kachiri was confident. It was your only hope. I didn't tell you this before either because I didn't want to worry you, but the curse has spread throughout the world. Now Victoria managed to make it to Italy and spread it to the Volturi themselves. Arrow and Caius are both gone, as well as Chelsea and her maid, and another of the guard members, Marcus, has issued a royal decree that all humanoids are to be instantly eradicated to stop the spread until a cure is found. If anybody else sees you, you're all dead. I can't protect you forever. Dimitri knows where I am and that I'm working on the cure. It's only a matter of time before some of them come here. This cure was the only chance I had of saving you. Esm sighed. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised you didn't obtain my consent before changing me into a vampire the first time around either. Carlisle looked away, chagrined. I'm sorry, Esm, but you're my mate. If you die, I die. I had to save you. I tried to get you to agree to treatment, but you all were so insistent Edward be the first to try the experimental cure. I understood why you felt that way, but the wolves would never allow us to inject him against his will. They'd protect Lee's imprint with their lives, regardless of how they feel about them personally, and had never agreed to be changed when he was finally in love and happy. Alright honey, I understand, Esm admitted, taking Carlisle's hand again. I still love you, and I can feel our bond growing strong again like it was before the curse interfered with it. Carlisle smiled at her, relieved. I'd like to perform an ultrasound on you now if you don't mind. But why? She asked, confused. Because there is a slight possibility your eggs may have been restored with the cure as well, he hesitantly admitted. She immediately insisted he check, and everyone crowded around the monitor while he ran the test. He breathed out a heavy sigh of relief when he saw there were indeed eggs there where the ovaries had been empty before he turned shining eyes to meet hers. Giving her a nod, she shrieked in happy excitement as tears ran down the sides of her face, eyes full of hope. She clutched his hand with both of hers and he gave them a gentle squeeze. The other hybrids only ovulate once a year and they've never gotten pregnant before, so there's no guarantees it'll ever happen, he warned, and even then it'll never work as long as I'm a vampire. I'll have to become a hybrid too for there to be any chance of us conceiving together. We're ready, Carlisle Rose suddenly declared, clinging to Emmett's bicep. Curious now together. Emmett nodded in agreement, looking forward to getting his strength and speed back while still being able to eat human food and go out in the sun without fear of discovery. Turning in Jasper's arms, I decided I didn't want to get caught in the middle of the horseplay going on in our front yard. I'd rather spend some quality time with my Jasper. Well, Garrett gets caught up with Peter and Charth. There'd be plenty of time to meet them all later after a little alone time with my mate. Smiling up into his beautiful honey eyes, I softly murmured, want to go for a walk? He grinned down at me agreeably and pulled me further into the forest away from the wrestling duo. Rather than walk, we jogged at a relatively slow pace through the trees, a mere 60 miles per hour. I was able to see the intricate details of the bark and leaves on the trees, all the way down to the myriad of insects hunting and feeding spiderwebs, were utterly fascinating with my new sight, and I was nearly distracted by watching one in progress. The gentle tug on my hand returned my focus back to my mate, and I followed along beside him, cataloging all the new sight sounds and smells into my memory. Jasper led me up the mountainside to an overlook with a beautiful view of the valley below. We sat side by side on a boulder. As my eyes darted around drinking in all the new information, I could see the abundant wildlife even miles away, running, hiding and scurrying along. I could see the birds feeding their babies high up in their nests, and the squirrels gathering seeds to stuff inside their cheeks. I made careful note of the bigger game like the elk, mule deer and black bears, and the predators who hunted them, the bobcats, cougars and wolves, for future reference. Leaning against Jasper, breathing in his scent with nobody else around for miles, I felt utterly peaceful and content. It was a beautiful feeling, one I wanted to hold onto for as long as possible. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me snugly against him, his face tilted into my hair, breathing in my scent in much the same way as I was doing to him. "This is the absolute best part of having a mate, these feelings," Jasper confessed. "It's even better than sex, though that's out of this world too. That temporary ecstasy, as great as it is, can't beat this peaceful euphoria, the feeling that all is right with your world and nothing else matters, you know." I nodded, rubbing my cheek on his bicep, my fingers squeezing his where our hands were wrapped together. I sent him the overwhelming love and happiness welling up inside of me and felt an answering tsunami of emotion flowing back into and over me. If I weren't already sitting, I'd surely have collapsed from the force of the deluge of positive feelings. We were silent for a while longer, simply reveling in each other's company and a deep emotional intimacy swelling between us. I could feel the bond between us growing stronger by the minute and took comfort in the knowledge that no one could ever tear us asunder. My Jasper would never leave or forsake me, had never hurt or betray me. I would never suffer being lonely or abandoned again. Wherever he went I would follow. I would always be able to find him simply following the chain leading from my heart to his. It would pull me, guide me, ground me, a balm to soothe my troubled soul. He was my world, my everything, the center of my universe, and I would do anything for him, knowing he felt exactly the same way about me. He is my equal, my perfect match, strong where I am weak and weak where I am strong. Together we can accomplish anything, I thought, smiling to myself. "What do you remember of your human life?" Jasper asked cautiously, finally breaking the comfortable silence between us. I thought about it for a few seconds, making sure my memories were intact, all the important things. As soon as I felt the burning, I knew what was happening to me, so I spent the time trying to distract myself from the pain by thinking of everything I'd experienced in life up to that point, everything that made me who I was, so I wouldn't forget myself. "Your parents," he murmured carefully. I nodded. "Yes, I remember. My mother was neglectful and emotionally abusive. She can't hurt me anymore." I didn't want to forget though and end up mourning something that wasn't real, some romanticized version of what I thought Renee should have been. Esme was more of a mother to me in the short time I knew her than the woman who gave birth to me had ever been. I remember Charlie and the conversations we had. In the days before Vicky attacked, they changed my whole perspective of both my dad and myself, teaching me about the unconditional self-sacrificing love of a true parent. Jasper nodded encouragingly, admitting, "I promised Charlie you'd call him after you'd awoken and fed as soon as you were coherent enough to carry on a conversation. He wants to stay in your life, even if it means changing into a vampire himself." "Really?" I asked, surprised. "Oh well, I guess that would be cool not to have to worry about him getting old and dying." It was pretty scary contemplating his mortality when one of his best friends just had a heart attack and died, leaving behind children my age and younger still. I wouldn't want him living with us if he did change, or even anywhere close enough to be able to hear us in the bedroom. That would be way too embarrassing. I don't think either of us would be able to look each other in the eye after something like that. Jasper smirked in agreement. "Considering your reaction to your dad's shower activities, I'd agree that you wouldn't want to live within hearing distance." "Oh gross, would you have to bring that up?" I whined. "Where's the brain bleach when you need it?" Jasper's laughter rang out over the valley, causing a flurry of birds to take flight in fright and small critters to flee to their burrows. I enjoyed the carefree sound and the feel of his chest shaking against me. I couldn't help but smile at the joy and amusement my mate was emitting. Once head recovered, he leaned over and grabbed a small dry twig off the ground, nearly unseating me in the process. "Here," he said, handing it to me gently. "I want you to bend this twig without breaking it." With my first attempt I felt like I'd barely used any pressure at all, yet the twig instantly snapped in two. "Try again," Jasper calmly responded, taking one of the two pieces away. It took quite a few tries, but I was finally able to put just the slightest featherlight touch on each end, enough to make the twig flex without breaking. I felt his pride as well as my own once I accomplished it. "That's the amount of force you need to use when interacting with humans," he informed me. "They're nearly as fragile to us as that twig, never forget it." I felt my eyes widening in shock. No wonder Edward was always so afraid of touching me. I realized it's doable, but it would be so easy to lose focus and use just a little too much force, causing bruises at the very least. It's not surprising he was never truly comfortable or relaxed around me in the months we were together, even if we were supposed to be mates. Jasper grinned. It's also the amount of force to use on electronics. I wasn't about to let you touch my cell phone until you could manage the twig. There's plenty more branches where that one came from, but getting a new phone is much more of a pain. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and entered Charlie's number, handing it over to me. Once it started ringing, I gingerly held it up near my face, not needing it up next to my ear to hear clearly, but wanting it close enough to my mouth for Charlie to hear me. "Hello." Charlie's gruff voice sounded tinny through the phone. "Hey Dad." "I'm back and better than ever," I cheerfully replied. "I'm awake and fed, and I remember everything. I'm still me, just stronger and more durable, and I still love you, even though I rarely ever said it before." "Els?" he asked, amazed. "You sound so beautiful and happy." "I am happy, Dad, wondrously so. In fact, I'm with my soulmate. I finally feel content and safe and complete in a way I never have before. I'll never be lonely again, Dad. Words can't begin to express how much that means to me." "I think I understand, Bells. I'm sorry you were so hurt for so long. I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner," he apologized, his voice choked. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to confide in you," I answered, knowing he was hurting. I didn't want him feeling like had failed me. "You were an awesome father, always there for me, even though I didn't always recognize it. I'm glad I didn't have to lose you in order to gain this new life and my new happiness. I'm glad you're still there for me, still my dad, loving me, despite what I've become." "Of course, Bells, I'll always love you no matter what," he quickly replied. "Stay safe, make sure you keep drinking from animals. There's been a lot of former vampires showing up here in town, seeking out the Cullens, in hopes of being changed back. The wolves are handling it. I'm glad you're not here right now. I don't know how their blood would affect you with you still so full of your own human blood, and I don't want you to risk losing the bond you've gained with Jasper. He's a good man, and I trust him to take care of you." I looked at Jasper with alarm at the news of other humanoids showing up in Forks. The curse is spreading. How had it spread so quickly, I wondered. Then I felt the pride of knowing Jasper had earned Charlie's approval, something Edward had never accomplished. "Okay Dad, will do. I'm going to go now, but I'll call you again later. Take care of yourself." I handed the phone back to Jasper, not trusting myself to press the button to end the call myself for fear of breaking it. "We need to get back to the others and get a status report," Jasper declared urgently after ending the call and putting away his phone. He grabbed my hand and we raced back at full speed. This time I didn't hesitate as we approached the house, seeing our three friends sprawled out comfortably on the porch waiting for us. Peter got off the porch swing and strolled down the steps to meet us. "Well, if it isn't the prodigal," returned Peter, sardonically greeted. "Hey pretty girl, what's a classy broad like yourself doing with a loser like this one?" I felt a small spark of anger at hearing Peter describe Jasper as a loser. He's Jay's best friend and brother, I reminded myself. Men often like to engage in trash talk with their friends and siblings. I dredged up memories of Emmett and Jasper trading insults with each other while playing one of their video games, trying to calm myself. "Jasper is the best mate ever," I defended, wrapping my arms around one of his and hugging it to my chest to ground myself. Peter shook his head. "You can't kid a kidder, sweetheart. He can't be much of a mate or lover, or his last mate wouldn't have left him for a dog. How bad does a guy have to be in bed for his wife to choose to screw an animal instead? I'm afraid you're setting yourself up for disappointment, doll." I narrowed my eyes, feeling the flames of my anger growing. How dare he insult my mate? Jasper is an incredible lover, better than you could ever be. I bet you can't make your mate orgasm without even touching her. That's deliberately pushing my buttons to get a rise out of me, I reminded myself. It's his favorite game. If I lose my temper, he wins. Peter's eyebrows raised, surprised by my challenge, then smirked. He has to be able to make his mate orgasm without touching her. Nobody wants to see that ugly scarred freak naked, not even his mate, so it's his only hope of getting any. I ought to do you a favor and take you away from him. He doesn't deserve you. Maybe introduce you to a few other friends you'd like better, like my buddy Garrett here. White-hot rage filled me when Peter referred to my mate as an ugly scarred freak, knowing that Jasper worried about his appearance and felt insecure about the condition of his body due to his numerous scars. It was hitting below the belt and wasn't even remotely acceptable to me as a form of joking around. However, the moment I heard the words "take you away from him," something snapped inside. All other words were nothing but white noise. There was no more rational thought, no more attempts to calm myself. My complex brain, with the ability to multitask, was entirely focused on a single goal: eradicating the threat to my mate. The enemy had declared his intention to separate me from my beloved, and it would happen over my dead pile of smoldering ashes. I pounced with such ferocity the enemy's body dug a furrow in the ground. "Oh goody, he's already digging his own grave," I thought, whimsically pulling his head back with one hand and holding down his shoulders with the other as my sharp teeth ripped into his neck like a hot knife through butter. Suddenly I was hit from the side by another vampire, knocked away from the enemy it'd been attempting to destroy. A large chunk of his throat came with me, and I spit it out as I rolled away tangled up with the new enemy. I heard the fierce growling of the vampire, who was now trying to get enough of a purchase on me to start ripping off limbs. Even as we tumbled end over end, suddenly the growling was replaced with whimpers and the deadly female was curled up in the fetal position beside me, no longer a threat. I moved to decapitate her so she couldn't come after me or my mate. Once she recovered from whatever was afflicting her, I wanted her out of the way so I could finish what I started with the one who wanted to take me away from my mate. He needed to die so he could never make good on his threat, could never separate or harm me or my beloved Jasper ever again. Before I could attack her though, I found myself scooped up in my mate's arms as he raced away. Why are we retreating? I wondered, frustrated and worried. We were winning. We should take out the enemy now. Well, we have the advantage, not leave them to recover and regroup. They might build up an army against us if we leave them to their own devices instead of acting quickly and decisively. Jumbled images assaulted my brain of a red-headed woman, threatening everyone I cared about, followed by a reminder of the fear and helplessness of another vampire, grabbing my human body and carrying me away, much like my mate was doing now, only that one had been an enemy intending to hurt and kill me. I felt the calm my mate was sending to me and deflected it off to the side, sending him my rage, my need to protect, and my desire to destroy. His steps faltered as he was hit with the strength of my emotions. He set me down and began decimating a nearby tree, shredding it into wood chips, creating a mound of mulch at his feet. I was pleased to see that he shared my anger and frustration now, but needed him to focus on helping me destroy our enemies instead of a harmless tree. "They'll bad guys hurt us," I spit out, attempting to explain as my mouth repeatedly flooded with venom, making it difficult to speak. Good grief, what happened to advanced thought processes and superior intelligence? I thought, disconcerted by my telegraphic speech. "I'm as bad as a toddler, because I'm a newborn, no wonder they refer to new vampires in childlike terms." This train of thought started slowly bringing me back to myself, forcing me to focus on something other than immediate death and destruction. Meanwhile, Jasper was able to ground himself again, having dispersed enough of the emotions I'd sent him. He moved over to me, his hands resting gently on my cheeks, filling me with peace and love. He shook his head, cooing softly to comfort me. "No bad guys, no threat, we're safe, Bella." Using my enhanced senses, I could tell there was nobody else nearby. We hadn't been pursued, as he said we were currently safe. I relaxed slightly, my eyes perusing my mate thoroughly, making sure he was without injury. I was frustrated with the clothing covering his body, preventing me from searching so much of his skin. I quickly ripped off his shirt, tossing it aside, and went for his pants, only to be stopped by his hands on my wrists. "Wait please, I want to keep my pants, honey," he declared. "Use your sense of smell, darling. You can tell I'm not leaking venom anywhere. If I were you, I'd smell it a mile away." I inhaled deeply, letting his scent calm me further. "No injuries, good. We stopped the enemies in time," I thought with relief. "Now we just need to keep them from coming back at us later, when we least expect it." "Why did we run, Jasper?" I asked, pleased that I was no longer drowning in my own venom and able to speak in complete sentences without choking on the overflow. "We didn't burn them so they can come at us again once they recover. What if they bring an army next time?" He shook his head. "They're not the enemy, Bella, they're our friends." That was Peter and Char. The enemy now had faces and names to go with, the seething hatred and distrust whirling around inside me. Peter the first growled, thinking back on the thing's head, said, "Hess, no friend of ours, Jasper. He intends to separate us and pass me around as a sex toy to other males. He said horrible things about you, untrue, but very hurtful things. I don't want any part of that." "He didn't mean any of that, sweetie, I promise. He was just talking smack to make you lose your temper and attack. It was supposed to trigger his gift, which would have been the fastest way to get a newborn like yourself to trust him and to keep you from being a threat to his mate, since you wouldn't have wanted to hurt him or his mate after getting a dose of it. Obviously it backfired. I guess Eddie's gift isn't the only one that doesn't work on you, sweetheart," Jasper explained. "I just don't understand why mine and Alice's gifts work, but Eddie's and Peter's don't." I narrowed my eyes in disbelief. Clearly my mate was influenced by Peter's gift and couldn't see how wrong those statements were. "Well, I'm not going to trust the little prankster. His charm doesn't work on me to make me forget or dismiss the hateful crap he spews, and I'm going to protect my Jasper from this asshole, even though he doesn't believe he needs protecting." Jasper felt my negative emotions and decided we needed a little more time to ourselves before he risked taking me back to confront our friends again. He grabbed my hand and pulled me along with him back to our rock where Wed sat earlier. He pulled me onto his lap, this time cradling me close to him. I rubbed my hands over all the skin of his chest, back and arms, tracing each and every one of his scars, allowing the contact to soothe us both. "My mate is here and safe," I reminded myself over and over again. "Has been through hell and back in the past, but he'll never let anyone hurt him again." "Don't worry, darling," he promised. "He'll never let anyone come between us. Nobody will ever be able to take you away from me." I nodded in agreement, rubbing my cheek against his chest, loving the way our scents were mixing together from the skin-to-skin contact. He had me press my handprint into the stone, and I was surprised at how easy it was, no more difficult than making an imprint in the sand as a human. He then put his own handprint beside it, tilting it so our curved thumbs and our straight pointer fingers met to form a heart. Then underneath of it, he carved J+B with his finger. This boulder has been sitting on this mountain face for thousands if not millions of years, but our love is far stronger than it is, he told me, ducking his head shyly and looking up at me through his lashes. I smiled, swept away by the love and joy his words made me feel, sharing the overwhelming emotions with him as my reply. When all else passes away, my love for you shall still remain, I assured him. His answering grin made me feel 10 feet tall and ready to take on the world. Sensing the tenor of my feelings, he hesitantly reminded me, we really need to find out what's been going on while we were out of it with your change. Apparently a lot has happened with the curse in a relatively short period of time. I sighed, knowing he was right. Okay, let's go interrogate the usual suspects. He snickered, leave the interrogation tactics to me this time. Okay little miss, terrifying it may be a while before one of them is even capable of speech. I grinned triumphantly, the bastard got what he deserved. Let's see him try to talk trash about my mate now without his voice box. I bet that burns. We returned back to the house at a leisurely pace, wrapped up in our own little peaceful bubble, giving the other occupants time to heal and recover their equilibrium. Char was hovering protectively over us, silently morose. Peter Garrett, on the other hand, was practically bouncing in place, eagerly awaiting our arrival. Well, if it isn't my new best friend, he declared happily upon spying us. That old coot has had it coming for a long time now, and anyone who can put that punk in his place is worthy of my warmest affection. Has been harassing the rest of us and getting away with it for far too long. I smiled slightly but kept myself hyper-alert to the whereabouts of both Peter and Char at all times. I noticed Char seemed equally wary of me. What happened, Char asked Jasper plaintively. How was she able to hurt him? It had been quite a wake-up call for Char, since her mate had always seemed invincible before. She'd never had to worry about losing him prior to today. Remember I told you Edward was never able to read Bella's mind, Jasper reminded her. I didn't really think anything of it, because both Alice's gift and my gift always worked on her just fine a few minutes ago, though she was able to stop my gift from working too. I think she may have some kind of gift that protects her from being influenced by others' gifts. Char's mouth dropped open, her expression horrified. But if his gift doesn't work on her, that means she can kill him. Jasper simply nodded while I narrowed my eyes at her. He called Jasper an ugly scarred freak and threatened to take me away from him and offer me up to his friends to have sex with. I growled he deserved it. Char frowned and shook her head. He was just spouting nonsense. He didn't mean anything by it, he was just playing with you. Oh really? Well, guess what, Char, I drawled. Peter is an ugly scarred freak. Nobody would want to look at him, much less touch him, not even his mate. He doesn't deserve you. I'm going to do you a favor and take you away from him, maybe introduce you to some better lovers. Char let loose a ferocious growl and tried to attack, murderous rage in her eyes. Of course Jasper promptly dropped her to the ground mid-pounce, writhing in pain. He was crouched protectively in front of me. I put a hand on his back and sent him some calm, pleased that it made my point. Jasper eased up and let Char sit up, where she promptly glared hatefully at me. Jasper was giving me a disappointed look that I didn't quite understand. What's the matter, Char? I challenged. I was just kidding, why weren't you laughing? That wasn't funny, you little bitch, she snarled. Garrett nodded, frowning. But I only said to you the same thing Peter said to me. Why is it okay for Peter to say those things to me about Jasper, but not okay for me to say those same things to you about him? Think about how that made you feel. And now you understand how I feel. I don't have Peter's gift operating on me to make me think whatever words come out of his mouth should be viewed with humor and camaraderie. I agree. With you it wasn't funny at all. Those words were extremely offensive on so many levels. Everyone's eyes widened as they realized the truth. I saw understanding register in Jasper's eyes, removing the disappointment. Nobody had been able to evaluate Peter's words and their effects properly until they heard them spoken by someone else. They had all been condemning me for saying such hateful things to Char, and now realized that Peter was the one who deserved the condemnation. Everyone turned to look at Peter, and he grimaced. I was pleased to see the large scar on his throat. It would serve as an eternal reminder not to mess with me or mine. I'm sorry, Bella, Peter apologized, his voice raspy. I was way out of line. I know how I felt to hear you say those things to my lovely Char, and it helped me understand in a way nothing else ever has. I promise to never insult or threaten you or Jasper like that ever again. I watched him suspiciously, inclining my head slightly in acknowledgement, though I didn't fully trust his words. He turned to Jasper. I'm sorry, brother, very sorry. I never should have said such hurtful things. It's one thing to tease, but I went way too far. I know we were trying to get my gift to work on Bella, so she would automatically trust me, and neither of us realized the dangers considering her ability to block Edward. Even as a human, I guess I'm going to have to earn her trust the old-fashioned way, and I've only made that harder with my stupid little stunt. Jasper smiled and nodded, appreciating the sincerity, remorse and love Peter was sending him. Peter turned back to me the way it usually works. My gift world ensured that all was forgiven and forgotten, erasing any hurt or hard feelings as a result. I've never worried about guarding my tongue or thought about how terrible the things I say really are. I never meant to cause such pain and resentment between us. I really am truly sorry and will work to earn your forgiveness and trust. Forgiven but not forgotten, my friend Garrett confessed. Your words can come back to haunt us when we're away from you. Peter's eyes widened and filled with shame, now knowing that he had been hurting people all these years, he could still play pranks and have fun without being insulting. I'm sorry for blaming you and not understanding how you felt to hear such horrible things, Char added. I understand why you attacked after you turned Peter's words back on me. I was ready to shred you, seeing you only as an enemy who wanted to separate me from my mate, triggering all my protective instincts, and I'm not an hours-old newborn. You're right, as much as I hate to admit it, your attack was fully justified. He deserved it. Peter winced hearing his mate's condemnation. It only solidified his resolve to make things right. So what the hell has been happening while Bella and I were out of it? Jasper demanded as the group settled into the living room to discuss the current situation facing the vampire world. Last I heard, Victoria was in police custody. Now I hear from Charlie that humanoids are turning up in Forks looking for our coven, hoping to be turned back into vampires. How has it spread so quickly? Riley went into Mexico and Victoria managed to get loose somehow and went straight to Italy, since it only takes 20 min for someone who has drank cursed blood to become humanoid themselves. This plague is spreading like wildfire. It's like the zombie apocalypse, only for vampires instead of humans, Peter explained. Jasper cursed, then asked with narrowed eyes, did you warn Maria when you saw which way he was headed? Peter winced and shook his head. I decided against it, but I did call all our other friends once I realized it was spreading, as did Carlisle and the Volturi. Jasper scowled. She cold stopped him right then and there. If she'd known what to watch for Peter instead, there are hundreds if not thousands infected by now. Barrett reported what he'd seen and done, which led to the explanation that animal blood was the only known deterrent for the time being and that Carlisle was busy working on finding a cure in the wilds of South America. Jasper called Alice to get a report from her on what had been happening on her end for the past few days. When she reported the death of Maria and the other southern warlords, Peter hopped up and began dancing around the coffee table, singing a rousing rendition of Ding Dong, the witch is dead, the wicked witch is dead. I smirked cautiously, admitting to myself he was rather amusing when he wasn't insulting or threatening someone I loved. Hush, Jasper half-heartedly admonished, trying to hide his smile. Even though Maria considered them friends, Jasper wasn't as sanguine about their past. He hadn't forgotten that she'd once planned to kill him, even if she had subsequently forgiven him for his desertion. Apparently they weren't the only former vampires to turn up at the Cullens' house in Forks, though a steady stream of visitors had come, having been told Carlisle was working on a cure and knowing he was an animal drinker. They believed his coven might be their last hope, considering the vulturous order to kill any humanoids on sight. Unluckily for them, most of them had murdered humans to steal transportation with which to approach Forks, and the wolves were able to smell the bodies decaying in the trunks or the small amounts of blood the humanoids had gotten on their clothing in the process. The wolves were now inclined to kill any and every former vampire they encountered, since, unlike Alice and Edward, who were directly cursed by the witch, these humanoids were clearly prior human drinkers by virtue of the words of the curse itself. As a result, the wolves felt no remorse in killing murderers, beings they considered evil, because they had no respect for human lives. Even though they had beating hearts now, they realized the former vampires had a choice to feed from animals instead, but continued drinking from humans anyway. Therefore, in the wolves' minds, they deserved what they got. Charlie was up to his neck in dead bodies. The FBI were now investigating what seemed to be a serial killer or a gang who liked to murder people and leave their bodies in the trunks of their own vehicles, abandoned in various places along the 101 both north and south of Forks, as there had been more than half a dozen such cars found on the side of the road by local and state police. The wolves were taking care of the other dead bodies, the non-human ones who wouldn't have worried family members, fretting over their sudden disappearance and demise. The ash heap was growing steadily. As soon as he hung up with Alice, Jasper called Carlisle to get an update on that front. "I've found a cure of sorts," Carlisle admitted, "though it turns the recipients into half-vampires instead of full vampires. At least it stops the curse." Half-vampires? Our group wondered what the heck. Carlisle explained all the differences between the hybrids and regular vampires. Rose and Emmett are changing now. As soon as they're finished, we'll be heading back to Forks along with several other hybrids. I'm hoping Alice and Edward will agree to be changed too once they see the results. I'm worried that they'll end up killed if they don't accept the cure. Will you join us there? "I'm not sure about having a newborn around the hybrids," Jasper replied skeptically. "I think it would be safer for everyone if we stayed away for a while. I'd hate for something to happen." "Their blood really doesn't smell appetizing," Jasper Carlisle cajoled. "Even the Amazonians agree they don't smell like food." Yeah, well, Bella nearly decapitated Peter earlier when she ripped out a large chunk of his throat, Jasper calmly replied. How well do the hybrids handle sudden limb removal? Wait, she attacked Peter's throat, how, Carlisle exclaimed. Seems she can be quite stubborn and determined when she wants to be, Jasper responded cautiously, not knowing who was listening in on Carlisle's side. Realizing his near mistake, Carlisle quickly covered it, surprised that Peter was caught off guard like that, as experienced with newborns as he is. Must be losing his touch in his old age, Jasper joked. Hey, Peter protested. Okay, I admit I forgot to engage my brain before shooting off my mouth. So what else is new, Garrett muttered. Peter shot him a look and continued, and I unwittingly triggered her protective instincts for her mate. As you know, there's little that can stop an enraged newborn in the process of defending his or her mate. They're like the Incredible Hulk on steroids. I wasn't expecting that level of aggression and wasn't in the proper defensive mindset, that's all. I see, Carlisle murmured in a confused tone, which indicated he really didn't see it all. Even though he knew what Peter was saying was true, he remembered Emmett as a newborn in a protective rampage over Rose. There was a huge earthquake and rock slide in the mountains that day, and only Rose had been able to calm him down, while the rest of the family made themselves scarce, running a perimeter to keep the humans away. Still, it didn't explain how she went for his throat. Nobody ever goes for Peter's throat due to his gift. The only way she could have gone for his throat was if Peter's gift wasn't working, like Edward's gift didn't work. Oh, Carlisle thought. Oh, I see, he muttered in a fascinated tone this time. Have you been in touch with the Volturi? Jasper asked cautiously. Catching his meaning instantly, Carlisle replied, yes, Arrow and Caius are both dead, as are Chelsea Afton, and Santiago Marcus is the one who killed them once they became infected, and he ordered all humanoids destroyed on sight until the cure is found. I haven't told him I found the cure yet because I wanted to take care of my family first, just in case. I don't want to say anything until I've ensured Alice's and Edward's safety, because I know the Volturi will come to me to investigate, and I don't want my children to be vulnerable. Jasper was relieved that Arrow was gone, as he was the greatest threat to Bella. With Chelsea gone too, the Volturi must be in a shambles, he thought, feeling as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Jane glared balefully at the waitress what offered her a children's menu. Feeling a headache coming on, the waitress massaged her temples as she stomped away, muttering under her breath, rude, disrespectful little brat. I hate being human, Jane whined to her brother, wishing she could have made the waitress writhe on the floor, screaming in pain. Alec rolled his eyes and let loose a long-suffering sigh. Jane was even more annoying as a humanoid than as a vampire, but with the benefit of her gift only working as well as it had back when she was human and accused of being a witch, thankfully, that meant her gift didn't work on him at all, though she could still affect the humans around them, enough to give them headaches. Though she doesn't need her gift to do that, he thought, with a snort. Her whiny voice and obnoxious behavior are just as painful. Why won't you change me back, she asked him for the 5th time. I can't, Jane, he reminded her yet again. If I tried, I'd be in the same boat as you. Can you imagine how hard it would be for us if we were both humans at our age? We'd be taken in by social services and sent to a foster home. I can't protect you if I get infected too. Why can't we go see Corin? I miss her, Jane complained. I do too, believe me, Alec growled, starting to lose his patience. They'd already had this discussion before multiple times, but Marcus has given the order to kill any humanoids on sight, so she'd kill you. Jane sniffed, scowling. Maybe that would be better than this. Are you eager to die now? He asked, throwing up his hands in exasperation. Jane pouted, sticking out her bottom lip, which didn't look at all cute now that she was no longer a vampire. No, but I need her gift. So do I, Alex sighed, feeling the longing ache inside him. So do I. The waitress brought Jane's food, which she had pointedly ordered off the adult menu. Jane's attitude improved marginally after eating her meal and drinking her soda. Shed developed quite an affinity for Coke, the sugar and caffeine, boosting her mood and energy level. For brief periods of time, she found she enjoyed the foods readily available in the modern age, particularly ice cream sundaes. After dessert, Jane was in the best mood she was capable of producing these days. Please, brother, let us try to find Corin. You can scout the area and find out if she'd be receptive. Maybe we can pay her. She left Italy suddenly, and it's awfully hard to live these days without funds of some kind. He hesitantly agreed, knowing he was in serious withdrawals and fiercely craving Corin's gift. Alec worried that if he didn't get relief soon, he'd finally lose his temper with his sister and injure or kill her himself in a fit of rage. So far had been able to simply knock her out with his gift. When her whining got to be too much, convincing her afterward that she'd fallen asleep. However, his fuse was getting shorter and shorter as time passed, and she continued grating on his nerves. If she weren't his twin, he'd have lit her up long ago. After hearing about how the humanoids were showing up in Fork seeking help from the Cullen Coven, Jasper decided to give Elizur a call and check on the situation there. Hello, Elizur answered cautiously. Hey, this is Jasper. I just wanted to check on you guys and see if y'all are having trouble getting overrun with humanoids. We've had some come here looking for help, yes, and we've complied with the Vulture's orders to execute them all on sight, Elizur assured him, his voice cold. Jasper was surprised. Really, I'd have thought you'd just keep them contained until Carlyle found the cure, especially the ones you knew. We would never go against a direct order from the Volturi, Elazar insisted. You do know Arrow's dead, right? Jasper offered. Oh, thank God, Elazar exclaimed, then caught himself. I mean, really, thank you for sharing that information, Jasper. Jasper chuckled. Case Chelsea Afton and Santiago are toast too, just to let you know. Even better, Elazar admitted. Now if Carlyle will just hurry up and find a cure, it'd be even happier. He did find it, but he didn't want to let the Volturi know until he took care of our family first. Several of our members were infected back in the beginning, before we knew the true nature of the curse, and we've been protecting them, Jasper confessed. Oh, thank heavens, Elazar gasped. To be honest with you, Jasper, we were allowing the ones who came here to stay with us at first, but then Tanya found her mate in one of them, so we ended up killing all the others to keep her mate safe. We were worried Dmitri would notice the concentration of people here and come investigate. We called to Ford to let them go in case they'd rat us out. To Arrow is ignoring the order to kill the Volturi, are obviously keeping Arrow's death quiet on purpose. Ah, that makes more sense, Jasper replied. Well, Carlyle and the others will be returning to Forks shortly if you want to join him there. I think I will, thank you, Jasper. Dmitri frowned as he noticed Carlyle moving rapidly away from South America, indicating he was on a plane. Emmett and Rosalie Sparks had disappeared 2 days prior, just as Esms had a few days before that. Sighing, he decided he'd better report this new information to Marcus. He knocked on Marcus' study door and found the ancient vampire staring moodily at a portrait of his long-deceased mate. Dmitri had been pleased to find that Marcus was an excellent strategist and easily capable of ruling the remainder of the vampire world without the help of the two brothers Wad, given all the orders for centuries. In fact, Marcus was much easier to serve and was the reason other than the obligation to settle the issue of the plague that Dmitri was willingly staying on in his position, now that Chelsea's false bonds no longer tied him there. Sir, I have news, Dmitri quietly informed him. Marcus had quickly done away with the title of master, not feeling the need for such pomp. Marcus turned to him, giving his full attention to the other vampire, hoping for good news for once. Yes. Unbeknownst to the rest of the vampire world, every few years, Arrow sent Dmitri out on round-the-world tours to collect sparks. As long as Dmitri came within 2 miles of any other vampires, his gift would pick up the essence of their minds. As a result, all he had to do was fly over their heads in a plane at 10,000 feet and could get enough of a reading to be able to find them forever after, even if he didn't know their names, gifts, or anything else about them. Sometimes he would fly lower in a smaller plane around 1,000 feet, circling an area so he could get visuals of the new vampires and listen to their conversations. He would play a recording of a human heartbeat so the vampires below would assume the pilot was human, and of course they couldn't smell him inside the enclosed aircraft. Vampires on the ground paid no attention to the circling plane, considering the human occupant to be of no interest or threat, allowing Dmitri to spy on them with ease. That was how he learned names and faces to go with most of the sparks. Arrow deliberately kept the rest of the vampire world in the dark about this aspect of Dimitri's gift to keep the upper hand. Most vampires had no idea Dmitri, and thus Arrow knew of their existence, since they'd never met either face to face. This enabled Dmitri and Arrow to keep track of the total vampire population in the world, as well as be alert if a collection of vampires was gathering in any one area. This made it easy for Arrow to quell a rebellion or uprising before it could gain strength up until the plague. The world's vampire population hovered around 500, with roughly half of them involved in the ongoing southern vampire wars of Central America. Because the vampires in that area changed so often due to creation and destruction, Dmitri would fly over that area every 3 or 4 months, noting the turnover of Sparks had just done one of his spy missions 2 weeks prior to learning of the curse. His gift worked on humans too, but Dmitri had succeeded in suppressing that aspect of his gift, so he wouldn't get overwhelmed with information overload, choosing only to watch the vampire sparks which glowed bright orange in his mind's eye and ignore the billions of others. Now that he knew what to watch, for he realized he could pinpoint which vampires had been infected by the curse as their spark changed color when they transformed. There are less than 100 true vampires left, Dmitri reported. Of the 400 wove transformed into these humanoid creatures, there are about 80 still alive. 75 of those are dispersed throughout Central America, probably having returned to their human families. The other 5 are Alice and Edward of the Cullen Coven in Washington State, Takumi of the Sato Coven in Alaska, Jane of the Volturi in Latvia, and Corin of the Volturi in St. Petersburg. Indeed, Marcus replied, lost in thought. What of Sulpicia and Athenodora? Corin killed them before she became cursed when she found them following her, Dmitri replied. And Alec? As still with Jane, he must be protecting her, thinking to hide her condition until Carlyle finds the cure, Dmitri speculated. I guess we know now why Carlyle has been working so diligently on finding a cure, though he obviously is not as trustworthy as I thought, since he has chosen to hide his family's condition from me and at the same time, deliberately disobeyed my orders on disposing of any humanoids. Marcus murmured thoughtfully. In all fairness, he was not with any of his coven at the time you gave the orders. Since then he has either complied, albeit slowly, or he has found a cure. His mate Esme and two others he sired, Rosalie and Emmett, were also humanoid and were located in South America. In the past few days, their sparks have disappeared off my radar while in his company. So they are dead then? Marcus inquired, frowning. Dmitri shrugged, answering, Arrow had me test my gift in many ways. In the past I found that when a human is changed into a vampire, his human spark disappears for me, and his new vampire spark doesn't appear until I get close enough for my gift to register it. I don't know why I can still detect the humanoids after their transformation, when I can't detect those who become vampires. Perhaps it's because their supernatural status is downgraded instead of upgraded, thus it's possible I'm no longer able to detect them, because they've endured the transformation back into vampires. Ah, I see how troublesome. If they'd been cured, transformed back into vampires, I'm sure Carlyle would already reported his success. Not necessarily, Dmitri countered. Hess on his way north in an airplane now headed toward Washington state, where his other two coven members are. It's possible he wishes to cure them before letting you know of his success. Of course it is also possible he has failed as you thought and is on his way back to terminate them the way he did the other three. If Hess been successful, why wait to report it? Marcus questioned, his brow furrowed. His family would be safe enough because the kill decree is in place only until the cure is found. Dmitri narrowed his eyes, perhaps to hide his culpability for the current predicament. I've looked back through my memories, watching the movement of his coven sparks, and discovered some disturbing information. His first companion Edward was the first humanoid. He had been traveling on his own away from the coven for several months when his spark changed color down in South America. He must have been the first to encounter the witch Carlyle mentioned. Marcus' eyes widened as Dmitri continued explaining. The rest of Carlyle's coven then flew to South America and went to Edward's aid, only for everyone but Jasper and Carlyle himself to become humanoid as well. They must have encountered the same witch because their change was different from everyone else's since then, taking days instead of minutes afterward. They went their separate ways, with a majority of them going to Washington while the couple Rosalie and Emmett went to California. After a few days a nomad encountered the couple in California and started to change before being killed by Rosalie. The couple rejoined Carlyle, and the next day another nomad, Victoria of the Hunter Coven, came in contact with humanoid Edward and began changing. Dmitri frowned as he added, she is the first of the new breed of humanoids, the ones exhibiting a rapid change, likely from drinking Edward's cursed blood. She must have had another vampire with her, relatively new one, since I don't have his spark registered within my gift, but her changing spark traveled away at vampire speed toward the closest airport, and we've seen that those who are transforming are incapacitated during that time. Victoria is the one who came here to Volterra and infected Afton and Santiago before Jonah killed her. He paused, searching his memory, then gasped in realization. Victoria spent a few weeks in Central America with one of the warlords prior to traveling up to Washington state. Perhaps she picked up a newborn companion there. If the newborn who took her to the airport while she was changing attacked her once she awoke as a humanoid, then flew to Mexico City once he awoke from his own change, the timing would be perfect for the spread of the curse in Mexico. The first spark I detect changing there was just outside the airport in Mexico City, and it was a rapid change like the ones that come from drinking from a humanoid. Though I don't detect a humanoid spark present from there, it spread like wildfire, wiping out the entire vampire population in all of Central America within 2 days. So in other words, this entire epidemic can be laid squarely on the Cullen Coven's shoulders, Marcus deduced. Hello, Jasper greeted, answering his phone to a foreign number. Greetings, Jasper of the Whitlock Coven, Dmitri replied, or is it Cullen Coven? It's Whitlock, Jasper answered tersely. I'm no longer part of Carlyle's coven. Indeed, Dmitri murmured, intrigued. Would that be related to recent events? Yes, Jasper admitted, choosing not to elaborate. I see, Dmitri responded thoughtfully. You are aware of the Volturi order to kill all humanoids on sight, yes? Yes, Jasper agreed, though I have not encountered any since the order was given. Dmitri hummed. That must be why he is away from his mate. It is true he has not seen her or his other coven mates since Marcus issued the order. Clever way to avoid killing them without being in direct defiance. Well, I am calling to request the assistance of the Whitlock Coven in Central America. There are a large number of humanoids running around there, and some of them have submitted to blood work at local hospitals, calling attention to themselves. They need to be eradicated. How are we supposed to recognize them? Jasper wondered. They look and smell just like humans, at least to animal drinkers anyway. I know where they are thanks to my gift. Dmitri informed him. I will give you addresses for them and can see when you're in their presence. Once you're close enough for them to see you, they'll give themselves away because they'll recognize what you are. Jasper paused, mental wheels spinning rapidly. Your gift is more advanced than we've been led to believe then. Yes, it is, Dimitri admitted with dark amusement, knowing Jasper was realizing he must know about Alice Cullen's humanoid status as well. Jasper exchanged worried glances with the rest of his coven. The Denalists are in trouble too. He thought Dimitri must know they are harboring a humanoid. Carlyle has found the cure, so the humanoids no longer need to be killed, he quickly informed the tracker. Indeed, Dimitri inquired politely, how interesting. The Volturi have yet to hear from Carlyle. Jasper grimaced, realizing had inadvertently thrown Carlyle under the bus. I believe he wished to do a bit more testing before he officially said for sure, but the success Hess had thus far is very encouraging. I see, Dimitri coolly replied. I'm sure he has 2 more test subjects already in mind for that testing too. Yes, he does, Jasper admitted, wincing at the confirmation that Dimitri was aware of both Alice and Edward. I'm glad Carlyle is being so diligent in fixing the mess his first companion and the rest of his coven created in the first place, Dimitri growled, finally losing his polite facade. Now that the majority of our kind are already dead, Carlyle should killed Edward as soon as he became cursed, not brought the rest of his coven close enough to the witch to become cursed too. For what it's worth, I agree with you. I told him so at the time and warned all the rest of them too, but none of them listened to me, Jasper confessed, knowing it won't do any good to try to hide it at this point. So much for the rumors of you being the infamous Diablo, Dimitri chuckled darkly. They are obviously untrue. It sounds like all the tales of your bravery and prowess on the field of battle are highly exaggerated too, Major. Of course I'm not Diablo, Jasper muttered, rolling his eyes. No doubt that Boogeyman is already dead if he ever even existed in the first place. As for my fighting skills, I hope not to need them. I wish to live a life of peace with my mate. Peace is a privilege that must be earned, and it always comes with a price, Dimitri countered. Only the weak and unworthy are ignorant of that price, or unwilling to pay it. Besides, peace is not always an option if one wishes to continue to exist. True, Jasper acknowledged. Regardless of whether or not the cure has been found, the 75 humanoids running around loose in Central America must be eliminated, Dimitri declared. They are not human and are different enough to indicate an exposure risk. They were all newborns at the time of being cursed, all less than 6 months old. If they are returned to their newborn status, they will nearly equal the number of mature vampires still existing. The warlords are all gone. Who would take responsibility for all these young vampires? There are simply too many. It would be a disaster. Jasper gasped in shock. Our numbers are really that low? Yes, and still dropping, Dimitri snarled angrily, though it seems to be stabilizing now. Only those with enough self-discipline to maintain an animal diet remain. If I find out Carlyle or Edward deliberately unleashed this to bring about that change in diet for the rest of us. No, Jasper hastily protested. I promise none of us were aware of the contagious properties of the curse until a few days ago. Those of us who kept an animal diet of our own free will prior weren't affected by the pull of the humanoid blood and didn't realize the effects it would have on others of our kind, not until Edward witnessed it happen with a nomad who attacked him. You mean Victoria of the Hunter Coven? Dimitri asked, a irritated female. Yes, that's the one. As soon as I found out what happened, I sent Peter and Chart to intercept her, but they were too late to stop her. I know you did. How did she get away? Should she have been incapacitated by the change? Her companion Riley ran away with her. She had other newborns with her as well that had to be dealt with before we could pursue them. Those that transformed were destroyed by my coven, but she and Riley managed to get away. What of the nomad whom Rosalie and Emmett killed while humanoid? Dimitri inquired suspiciously. Rose set him on fire when he attacked Emmett using hairspray and a lighter. He was ashes before he had time to transform, Jasper replied, realizing just how good Demeter's gift was and worried what it meant for his family and friends. Shess led a very sheltered existence with no real experience of fighting or violence. It was her first ever vampire kill, and when she described it to us later we thought it must been a newborn who panicked from the flames, giving her time to get his mouth and eyes as he tried to put out the ones on his head and back. Dimitri sighed. A fairly reasonable theory, I suppose, given the nature of the second-hand account. The fact is, Jasper Whitlock, you were a part of the coven that caused this epidemic. Even though you have separated yourself from them, you did not inform the Volturi of the issue. As soon as you learned what happened to Victoria, as you should have, if you wished not to be held accountable, the least you can do is help clean up the mess in Central America. Jasper quickly consulted with the rest of his coven, seeing if they were willing to assist. Garrett nodded, unfazed by the idea. The things we do to cover your ass, Peter muttered under his breath. You'd be lost without us. Charlotte rolled her eyes and nodded her acceptance as well. Well, Dimitri questioned impatiently. I will send my coven to assist you. Unfortunately, my maid is a newborn only days old, and I don't want to bring her anywhere near the humanoids. Even though she's drinking animal blood, she still has her own human blood inside her, and am worried she might be affected by the call of the curse. I also can't afford to leave her on her own, since she's so new, Jasper admitted. But why is he lying to me? Dmitri thought furiously. Your maid is not a newborn, she's a humanoid. I can see her spark up in Washington state, you imbecile, he growled enraged. No, you can see Alice Cullen in Washington state, Jasper countered, huffily offended. When she became a humanoid it broke the mating bond between us. I found a new mate in a human, brought her to Oregon and changed her. I didn't inform the Volturia Victoria at that time, because I was burning alongside my mate due to my gift, taking as much of her pain as I could. I had been informed the situation was under control prior to losing coherency and was unaware of when that status changed. You have a new mate, Dmitri gasped. I didn't think that was possible. It's one of the side effects of the curse, Jasper explained. I wasn't the only one whose bond was severed as a result of it. Really, do you think it would work to remove the bond if one of the mates was already dead? Dmitri wondered, speculating about Marcus. Maybe his pain would disappear if he were cursed and then cured. I don't know, but I think it's certainly a possibility, Jasper offered. Knowing where Demetrius' mind was going, I can't imagine Marcus being willing to try, though, he thought. I felt a lot more relaxed after the others left to join Dmitri for his mission in Central America, though I felt guilty that we weren't going with them to help. I sincerely hoped they weren't going to be in any danger, and hated that Jasper was being made to pay for the Cullens' mistakes. Edwards in particular, his was the one voice of reason amongst a crazy cacophony of depressing delusions regarding their hope for humanity. It wasn't his fault none of them listened. They were so willing to throw away the lives and love they had in the blind belief the grass must surely be greener on the other side, I thought, irritated. So were you? A voice inside me taunted. What do you mean? I asked myself, furrowing my brow. The I've condemned them for believing being a vampire was better than being human, for wanting to change their status, for lamenting what they didn't have, instead of being happy with who and what they were, the voice reminded me. Yet you did exactly the same thing. You hated being human, seeing all the negatives instead of the positives. You wanted to become a vampire, believing it was so much better instead of being happy with your human self and the future you had as such. How can you blame them when you're guilty of the exact same thing? Crap, you're right, I realized unhappily. I had been a hypocrite. My new vampire brain was easily able to spot it and hold myself accountable. Still, I'm glad I became a vampire. I love Jasper and wouldn't change it for anything. You were willing to become a vampire to be with Jasper, wanting to be his equal, but really you loved the idea of being powerful and graceful too. You were tired of being a damsel in distress and wanted to be able to save yourself. You wanted to be beautiful and young forever. You wanted the life of a vampire and all the positive things you knew it entailed, easily willing to sacrifice the negatives for your perceived gain. My inner voice pointed out, shaming me with its honesty. You didn't want to be a mere human anymore. If he had changed into a human for you to be like you wouldn't have been happy. I know, I admitted, hanging my head. It was true, I couldn't stand the idea of Jasper becoming human. If it were somehow an option to do so, without the negative aspects of the curse, I wanted both of us to stay vampires. In my mind, it was the only guarantee of eternal happiness. If we were human, he could fall out of love someday, he could leave me. My fear of abandonment flared this way. I'll never grow old, fat and frumpy, never get cancer or heart disease like grandma and grandpa, never get dementia, losing myself and forgetting my loved ones like Nana did. All my grandparents and great-grandparents died young, in their late 30s and early 40s, except Nana, and she was only 65 when she died, suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. I have terrible genes. That's a big part of why I didn't want children and why I'm so worried about Charlie's health. Ella, Jasper questioned, concerned, sensing my negative emotions. Just thinking, I whispered, giving him a tremulous smile. What's wrong? He murmured, wrapping his arms around me lovingly. I sank into his embrace, loving the way it felt to touch him, to breathe in his calming scent. It settled me the way nothing else could. I really need to sort through my thoughts before I can share them. It's nothing bad, just a few home truths I was realizing about myself and my motivations. Okay, he agreed, nuzzling me. Just remember, I love you. You're my whole world. I'll never leave you or forsake you. I smiled widely, my eyes wet with unshed tears as I gently squeezed him. I know I feel the same way about you. I thought about how much I love him, letting it fill me and overflow into him. I felt his lips turn up in a smile against my skin, relaxing against him. I got lost in thought again, remembering all the things I'd said and done since the Cullens returned to my life. You never explained your concerns about passing on your genetic deficiencies and the likelihood of having a very short lifespan to Edward or the others, so how could you expect them to know or understand them? My inner voice prompted. Carlyle Wold read the patient history in my chart, I thought. You know, he would have respected your privacy and wouldn't have shared that with the others, including Edward, the voice countered. True, I mentally sighed. Still, I'm fairly certain Edward read my chart himself while I was in the hospital. He was so nosy he would have leaped at the opportunity. I know he and Carlyle frequently discussed my health status. Maybe that's why Edward was so concerned about you eating healthy, just as you've worried about Charlie's diet and tried to change it for the better, my inner voice retorted. I mentally winced at the realization was Edward's annoying habit of pushing healthy food at me, which I had seen as controlling really any different than me trying to get my dad to eat salad and other green vegetables. The voice was quiet for a moment as I adjusted my perspective, recognizing my own shortcomings in some ways. I had been just as pushy as Edward had been thinking. I knew what was best for others, making decisions for others without consulting them, and blatantly lying to my parents in an effort to protect them. I remembered the hurtful things I'd said to my dad. While James was listening to get him to let me go without a fight, I deliberately hit Charlie with the words I knew would have the most emotional impact, would do the most damage to his psyche, robbing him of the strength to argue with me to save time and energy. I left him broken, consoling myself it was to save his human life from the dangers of the supernatural world, believing it was the lesser of two evils, exactly like Edward did to me. How did I not recognize that strategy before? The parallels are so obvious now. While Edward didn't listen to you about what you needed and wanted for the future, you didn't listen to him either. My inner voice relentlessly pushed, encouraging the introspection. He wanted to become a human just as strongly as you wanted to become a vampire. He hated what he was, hated the weaknesses he perceived to be inherent in his kind, and believed humanity was the answer to happiness, the same way you believed becoming a vampire could fix all the issues you hated about your human self. You were just as stubborn and uncompromising in your beliefs of what was necessary and best for the two of you to succeed as a couple as he was. Ugh, I thought maybe I don't really like this vampire brain after all. The truth hurts, the voice smugly replied. The trick to growing up is learning from past mistakes, so you don't keep repeating them. Resolved to become a better person and listen to others more, particularly my awesome mate, I turned to Jasper and smiled, wrapping my arms around his neck. I kissed him lovingly. What would you like to do now, Jay? He raised an eyebrow, carefully assessing my emotions. What were you thinking so hard about? Just realizing some of my past mistakes and trying to learn from them, I admitted with a shrug. I finally realized how stubborn and opinionated I can be. He snorted, his lips twitching. Really, you? Yes, I huffed, rolling my eyes at his playful teasing. I don't want to run roughshod over you, Jay. A good relationship involves give and take. I know we all like to have things our own way. That's just human nature, or well, you know, the nature of any sentient being, I guess would be more correct. What I'm trying to say is I want to make sure I take your needs, wants and desires into account as well as my own. I want us both to be happy and fulfilled, you know, not just me. He grinned widely, sending me his love and pride. Thank you, darling, I want the same. Returning his grin with one of my own, I asked, so what do you want to do now, Jay? It's your turn to choose. And what do I want to do with my lovely mate now that we have the house all to ourselves? He mused, his eyes locked with mine as they started to darken. It didn't take a genius or an empath to guess the direction his thoughts were going, and I was more than willing to follow right along my own mind, skipping eagerly and enthusiastically along that same path. Alec left Jane with strict instructions not to leave the hotel room while he was hunting. He raced out into the night, hoping she would sleep while he was gone. He wasn't far from the last known location of Corin, at least by vampire standards, and hoped to find her without Jane weighing him down both physically and emotionally. He hated moving at a human pace, but he would have done so willingly enough if his sister didn't complain every step of the way. Alec was in desperate need of a fix from Corin's gift. His emotions had been going completely haywire, making him prone to constant irritability and bouts of rage. He was unable to find inner peace or contentment, the emotions Corin had been manufacturing within him for centuries. He had forgotten how to create his own feelings of happiness and joy after being out of practice for so long. Corin had used her gift ever since he awoke as a newborn, grateful to Arrow for saving him from the burning pyre the townspeople had built for him and his sister, and bonded by Chelsea with a fierce loyalty to the Volturi, so his feelings had never really been his own since he became a vampire. He had tremors now too, making him slow and clumsy for a vampire, though they weren't noticeable to human eyes, yet he also felt a stabbing ache in his chest and head relentlessly assaulting him. He felt a new kinship for the homeless junkies he used to hunt while out on missions for the Volturi, guessing they'd often had familiar sensations, and thinking at least had put them out of their misery. After feeding, Alec tracked down the address Dimitri had given him, surprised and alarmed by the sound of a single heartbeat in the tiny cottage. Breaking inside, he found the humanoid Corin asleep in her bed. A burst of rage welled up inside him, tempting him to wring her neck. She's just as bad as a Jane. Why couldn't she stick to the animal died, he thought angrily, glaring down at her malevolently. No doubt Shess lost her gift like Jane did. Now what? Sensing his gaze, her eyes popped open and darted in his direction. The predatory gleam was obvious even to her human eyesight as the moonlight reflected off his pupils, making them shine in the darkness. Have you come to kill me? She inquired calmly. No, he sighed, struggling to contain his disappointment. I suppose I can help hide you until the cure is found so you can be restored. She immediately shook her head, scowling. No, I don't want to be cured. I like being human. I like not having a gift. I just want to be normal. We need your gift, Alec growled, frustrated. We don't want to need it, but you've made us dependent on you. We're addicted now and going through severe withdrawals, so you will become a vampire again and fix the damage you've done. She shook her head emphatically. No, even if you force me to become a vampire again, I won't use my gift anymore. I won't be anybody's puppet. I was trapped by Chelsea into following arrows, bidding locked in a tower for centuries, and forced to use my gift with no thought to my own needs, wants or desires. Forget it, I'll never use that stupid gift again. You have to, Alec roared. I'm hurting because you used it on me, then took it away. I can't even function. You've made me into a damn addict, and you will fix it. No, she refused quietly but determinedly. I won't. I killed Sulpicia and Athenodora because they refused to take no for an answer, desperately clinging to me and begging for more, and I'll do the same to you. I refuse to be used anymore. A tentative grasp of control over his emotions Alec had tenaciously been clinging to suddenly snapped, flooding him with rage, allowing his instincts to take over his mind. Corin was no longer a sentient being with whom had shared a castle for well over 1,000 years, or even a means to an end. She was now an obstacle in his path, the cause of his pain and turmoil, but no longer the remedy. His path was clear. She needed to pay for what she'd done to him. She needed to be eliminated so she could never have power over him again. He ripped her to shreds, bathing the room in her blood. When he finally returned to himself, his chest was heaving, his skin sticky. He felt slightly nauseous at the horrific scene before him. The grisly carnage and raw destruction had wrought. He didn't want to scare his sister by returning to her doused in vital fluids and bits of flesh, so he stepped into the shower, clothes and all, letting the warm water wash him clean. He raced back to the hotel afterward, his shoes squishing and squelching with every step, the wind whipping past his body, dried his clothes until they were merely damp, but his socks were still soaked inside his shoes, irritating his skin the way they wrinkled and rubbed. Normally it won't really bother him, but he was operating on an extremely short fuse these days, and every little thing seemed like an insurmountable problem. Once back in the room, he instantly ascertained that his sister had been missing for several hours, likely going out not long after, had left her on her own. Growling to himself over her defiance, he quickly changed into dry clothes and shoes so he could blend in with the humans and went looking for her, following her scent trail. To his dismay, he found her scent mingled with a vampire's, and worried that he now had another humanoid to protect, he realized the vampire had picked Jane up and run with her, and he followed the trail into the forest. Ivan watched Alec approach from his perch up in a tree. Ivan had recognized Jane when he saw the girl glaring at a human woman, causing the woman to begin rubbing her temples as she stumbled away. Had seen that glare on the young teen's face years before when it was directed at himself and his mate, even though neither he nor his mate had broken the law and were both perfectly willing to cooperate. But the vulturous investigation of a rogue vampire wad passed through their territory days before the sadistic young witch had insisted upon using her gift prior to the interrogation to ensure they were aware of the consequences if they didn't answer quickly and truthfully. Ivan had hated the little bitch ever since, holding a grudge for the pain his mate had needlessly endured, but had been powerless to do anything about it. Upon seeing Jane in humanoid form, he had gleefully kidnapped her and brought her out into the woods, where he had tortured her slowly before ending her completely. The Volturi decree had given him the power to take out his enemy with royal sanction. It was a duty that was a pleasure to perform. Alec fell to his knees, crumpling in on himself when he found his twins' remains shed, been dismembered, the body parts carelessly tossed aside, bits and pieces strewn all over the ground. It reminded him of the gruesome scene inside the cottage had left behind, but soon realized the difference. His sister had been deliberately and methodically tortured, her death drawn out, her pain maximized before her heart stopped beating, whereas Corin's execution had taken mere seconds. Her soul rapidly dispatched, her mind blissfully unaware of her body being shredded. Ivan watched the boy fall apart. Alec had stoically watched the proceedings, his expression bored and unconcerned, as Jane tortured Ivan and his mate for her own amusement. He hadn't tried to stop her, hadn't spoken up, hadn't cared at all. As far as Ivan was concerned, that made the boy equally guilty. At least the other guardsman, Dmitri, had grimaced, had apologized with his eyes, and had sharply commanded, "Enough, they are innocent, save your wrath for the one who deserves it." Jane had stopped then, but had glared at Dmitri in such a way as to make him flinch infinitesimally. Ivan had realized that Jane used her gift on the Volturi tracker, albeit briefly, to punish him for speaking out against her. The fact that Dmitri had already been tensed and reacted so minutely spoke volumes. Dmitri had known how she would react to his words before he spoke them, had expected the pain and readily absorbed it, which meant he was used to being on the receiving end of Jane's gift that had earned Ivan's respect and forgiveness for the man. Ivan was pleased to see the pained emotions on Alec's face, glad to have caused him to feel the same helplessness and misery had felt while his mate suffered under the witch's torture. He saw the moment the boy recognized that his sister had been tortured and vowed vengeance. It was the moment he'd been waiting for, and he sprang from the tree, beheading the infamous teenager in one smooth movement before he could utilize his slow-moving mist to defend himself. Ivan laughed with glee upon noting the impotent rage in the boy's eyes. That's right, you're helpless now, unable to attack the one who tortured your sister. How does it feel to know you failed to protect her, that she felt intense pain and agony, which you were not only unable to prevent but cannot even avenge? He saw the light of recognition in Alec's eyes and nodded. That's how I've felt for hundreds of years, ever since your sister tortured my mate for no reason. You watched uncaring then, but I bet you care now. You cold stopped her, but you chose to condone her actions with your silence and disinterest, instead giving her free rein to inflict her terror and agony on those undeserving of it. Remorse flickered briefly in Alec's eyes, knowing he and Jane brought this on themselves. They'd believed themselves invincible, and for so many years they had been, but once the plague hit, everything changed. Part of him had known, standing in the throne room, encircled by the hatred and malevolent glares of former comrades, that it would only be a matter of time before their past would catch up with them. It's why he had taken his sister and run with her, why he hadn't dared trust anyone to know or help once Jane had become infected. They no longer had Arrow and Chelsea to protect them, to ensure begrudging forgiveness and lack of consequences for their callous and hurtful treatment of others, and had known third, be a line of those seeking retribution for their past actions. The best part of this is that I have Volturi approval, so I don't even have to worry about them retaliating against me for taking my vengeance, Ivan admitted cheerfully. She was a humanoid, so I was doing my duty by destroying her. You had obviously been hiding and protecting her, clearly in direct defiance of the order to kill, therefore you made yourself an enemy of the Volturi, committing treason by deliberately ignoring a royal decree. Thus I'm doing my duty once again by destroying you. This is the best day I've had in years. He built a bonfire, toasting the two witch twins together, watching carefully to make sure there was nothing left of Alec to be put back together. After making sure the ashes were out and wouldn't start a forest fire, he skipped happily home to his mate to inform her of his busy night. He was delighted to be able to tell her the witch twins would never hurt her again, restoring the peace of mind and faith in him she'd been lacking ever since the torture session she'd endured hundreds of years before. The Metri noted the loss of Corin's spark in the presence of Alec and the loss of Jane's spark in the presence of Ivan, followed by the loss of Alec as well. We've lost so many, he lamented. Maybe some of the newborns in Central America will be worth saving. I should bring Elazar in to evaluate them before we kill them all. He'll have to help if he wishes to save his coven from the consequences of harboring a humanoid. The end.